Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with the Big Boys table. I am joined by three manly men. We got Nekron, we got Dicksuck, and we got IskatuMesk. Welcome, gentlemen.
So
Hi.
So, yeah.
You
Here we are.
boys like some
Yeah.
big boys.
We are all challenged at birth. That's the title of the episode. And we're going to be talking about what challenged us throughout the years. What improved us as individuals. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
So the topic of this video, this talk show podcast episode is basically we're just going to be talking about games, game challenge, how challenge is an integral part of an experience when you're consuming any piece of media, but I think especially interactive media like video games is pretty important. And we'll be discussing some of the games that have been released lately. We were just talking about Dark Souls, actually. I guess that's a good enough tipping point for starting it off.
Dark Souls is a hard game.
Everybody
because it kills the player, so that's why it's hard, right?
Yeah, everybody views Dark Souls as pretty hard. So we can talk about why that might be. Maybe clear up some unfortunate misconceptions about that game. What do you guys think? Nekron, do you have any experience playing Dark Souls? Are you a Dark Soulman?
No, but
Crazy,
I have never played Dark Souls, but I have pretty frequently heard like various games being called Dark Souls or something like. I'm pretty sure I've heard StarCraft World War being called Dark Souls over the years.
Oh no! By who? Who is responsible for this lie?
No idea.
All right. Well,
Dark Souls. I know that Dark Souls is like extremely inconvenient to actually play, right? And that's the biggest difficulty in the game. Correct?
Yeah. Most of the time you're fighting the game as opposed to fighting the enemies in the game.
So you could argue that in Brood Warrior are also fighting the game to some degree at least, because mechanically it's certainly more like challenging than struggling.
There are some deliberate design decisions that Blizzard made that make the 12 unit selection limit, not having multiple building select, all that stuff, where you do have to exert more control and click more than you would have otherwise. And you have to, no auto rally, so you have to right-click your SCVs to mine the resources or whatever. So there are certainly some elements of Brood War that you could argue that you are fighting against the engine as opposed to fighting against the enemies in the game. But I think it's different for Brood War because it's primarily a PvP game, right? So you're fighting against other players, and you're trying to make less mistakes than those players.
Yeah, and
it's
they're also limited by the same factors.
Right, so it's not. There's never really an unfair situation. Whereas, like in Dark Souls, it's mostly a single player game. There is some PvP elements. I have never experienced it. I think Mesk and Dicksuck
They're
have.
dreadful.
Yeah, so we can talk about those later on, I suppose. But for the core experience of just playing Dark Souls single player offline, it's very different than when you're playing Brood War. The general way that most people play Brood War, which is 1v1 melee, where the enemy is not limited by the same things that you are. You're supposed to be fighting like giant bosses with crazy movesets or whatever. Like it's an ARPG. So
yeah. Well, you know what isn't different between Dark Souls multiplayer and single player is you're always getting fucked over by the game's mechanics rather than somebody who's better than you at the game, no matter what you're doing. Yeah, I mean,
the hackers in that game. Like, if there's one positive thing Dark Souls has, it's the hackers. Like, because I watched a guy start a stream for Dark Souls. The first thing he runs into is a guy that just teleports around the level, collecting all the enemy units, and they just all stick to him, and they just teleports on top of the player, and they all start attacking him.
That's
pretty not much different from how the PvP is played without hacking.
Yeah,
it's like
true. This is a lot more blatant.
Yeah, they're just running around you in circles trying to backstab you from like weird 45-degree angles that don't even make sense. You just like teleport into place and get backstabbed. So it's not really much different from the hackers.
No.
That's really weird to me though, because I think that even though Dark Souls is really not my kind of game when you're playing it single player, the idea of having another player come into the game world and interact in a way where they're sort of trying to get the other player killed, but they're also interacting with the game world to accomplish that to some degree, that seems kind of cool. Like, It would be like if you had in Brood War, for example, somebody who was like a melee game, but there's also like a strong enemy AI running around, and you can somehow direct the attacks to the other player in some cases to gain an advantage, or something like that. Like it sounds kind of neat in practice, or on paper rather, but in practice,
too bad it ends up working out where the guy who comes in has a hero unit that can snipe you from across the map or just teleport around. That's how it always seems to work with Dark Souls or any game of that nature.
Someone has fallen off of Hunter Bluff and died. I can tell because there's bones here. So obviously this is the Dark Souls of MMOs.
Oh no!
Yeah, everything is the Dark Souls of that genre.
Well, platforming in that game is way harder than fighting the enemies. That's for sure.
Yeah, the hardest parts of that game are the parts where you have to platform through like the regular game terrain. So in Orlando, the platforming section.
So why do you guys think that Dark Souls is it purely the fact that the competition, quote unquote, of Dark Souls is so banal and so easy and so casual that it is considered a hard game? Is that really
Basically,
why?
if you wanted to actually play a hard game that was well designed, you wouldn't be playing a game from like the last 15 years. You'd be playing something like R-Type, you'd be playing cave games, you'd be playing, say Brood War, for example, or you'd be playing something more competitive like, CSGO or even League to an extent, if you're like more of a casual individual who doesn't really like putting in a lot of effort into competitive play. But Dark Souls is not at all unique. There's nothing about it that really stands out in terms of its execution. It has some neat ideas in it, but the execution's really bad. But it is, at this point in the industry, one of the only games of its kind because it actually intentionally seeks out to kill the player. And the vast majority of the ways it kills you are gotchas. And even that doesn't really exist in today's industry because most developers are really, really scared of alienating casuals and whales. And it's funny because a lot of, like I mentioned before, a lot of the casuals and whales and stuff, they actually kind of want to be challenged. They just want to have their hand held through it. So that's what Dark Souls does.
So what would be ways where you perceive Dark Souls to handhold players, despite the fact that its message, its core design philosophy. Okay, iframes.
Yeah. So Dark Souls, I mean, in a way, if you look at it as an isolated idea, particularly with Dark Souls 3, is when they sort of reach like their ultimate zen as a way of describing it, of how they executed it. It's kind of a long subject, so I'm not really going to go too depth into it, but the fact that the vast majority of Dark Souls is just about rolling at a specific point basically means that the game is just as Simon Says. It's all an elaborate quick time event. On top of the fact that most of the bosses and stuff are all rotation based. So you really will see this exposed a lot in, by people who have mastered those rotations and know precisely what to do. You'll see it all amounts just to a quick time event that you can perform blindfolded, in fact, as was performed by individuals at GDQ.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, so it's like, oh, I didn't do this rotation, so let's just reload. Like when they were gonna say they were gonna fight the bosses blindfolded, I thought it might actually be kind of interesting, but it really just like all it does is just expose just how linear the game's mechanics are. Obviously, to get to the stage of where you understand the controls enough to iframe everything, it can take some time. So there is definitely like a skill cap in terms of the technical skills you need to get through your head to really perform a lot of that stuff. But
if you're playing a specific class, that is like there are also classes in that game that just make it easy mode.
Yeah.
Where I'm sure you've seen it, where people will go into a boss and just one shot him because he's playing like a specific class with specific item sets and like
you can just grind too. Like
yeah.
If you really have problems, you just grind and just stack your out. Like I went like pure dex, and I started barbarian like I did in every other game. So I was doing it the quote-unquote most Dark Souls way. I played the Dark Souls of Dark Souls. And it's still, like, even then...
Well, the whole idea is that the gameplay doesn't... So, like, a big portion of challenge when you're talking about single-player content is always AI. How does the game react with non-scripted events where you have situations where it's like, okay, the AI's reacting to me, and that's creating a challenge that the developers... Like, the developers can have some say in that, but obviously it's like more emergent. The gameplay is more emergent if you're talking about AI. So Dark Souls doesn't really have AI for its units, though. They don't see the game around them very well.
There is a couple of units in Dark Souls 3 that actually have reasonable AI. The one that comes to mind is the last boss of Ringed City, the dual fight. Not the dude with a sword, the woman that shows up. I believe you have to have killed Madeir for her to show up. I can't remember the exact conditions that she shows up there, but I think you have to have killed all the bosses for her to show up. And she's not like a true boss. She's just basically like a phantom, but she has like all the AI in that game isn't in AI, but they managed to throw in enough scripts on her for her to actually behave in a manner that it feels like a PvP fight, but without the net latency. So in that respect, like that fight, I felt that fight was actually pretty reasonable because it made use of the game's mechanics, which a lot of the fights don't. You didn't have to worry about the busted as fuck collision that you do in 90% of the game, and you know it wasn't like a wall of health you had to grind through. So
Yeah.
there is, you know, AI and stuff in that game. It's just they opt out of it and prefer the big sweeping attacks that hit everything in a really busted up collision, because the whole design of Dark Souls that they really dial into as they continue through the series is you just use iframes, match an enemy's rotation. It's basically a turn-based QTE. That's basically what it is. Like, until you get to the stage where you can exploit everything, like you've played it enough to know the ins and outs of all the collision and stuff, and you can do stuff like speed runs, the average experience of someone who's like midway, like they know enough of the game to play it, but they're not like gods at the game, it just is basically Simon Says.
So what it then is, like, basically what you're telling me, and what I've observed from Dark Souls is consistent with this, is that the design of the game is mostly just to reinforce the whole idea that you have, you know, iframes, and that's how you win. So it seems somewhat consistent, but it's not a great way to...
You know what? That's also only consistent for one way that you can play the game, where it's a game where you have all these other you have quote unquote spell casting classes where you're supposed to supposedly like stay back and cast spells and run away. You're like a glass cannon, so that whole thing kind of goes out the window with any other class that's not like a melee based class. So it's kind of silly.
Because you can also still iframe. Like, anything comes up to you, you just push a button and say, hey, no matter what you just did, it didn't do anything to me because I'm actually now entirely invulnerable to damage.
Which makes, like, your whole tanking method, like, getting this really good armor completely fucking obsolete. Like, you could play a glass cannon, two-shot a boss, and it's, like, the same exact... Like, it doesn't make a fucking difference. If you know the iframe, where to roll when an enemy will slash at you or do his attack, like, it doesn't matter.
What I discovered is that because a lot of their abilities are based on root motion chains, there's a lot of bosses in that game where if you just stand in a specific area, you will actually not even get hit by half of their attack. Like, you just hug one specific side of a lot of the bosses and you just, like, the fight just becomes incredibly trivial.
Yeah, I also noticed that with it was mostly like terrain-based shit that you would exploit to beat a boss, where it's like you would stick behind either like some pillars on this side of the map, or you would go up a hill where they couldn't hit you with certain attacks, and you would just completely fuck over the boss. They wouldn't be able to hit you with half their attacks. They would have to do like a specific thing. It's like very cheese heavy in that aspect.
Yeah, at least I think Dark Souls 3 is a bit more improved from the older titles in that regard. There wasn't as much in it that I really felt like I needed to cheese to get through. I mean, you can cheese a lot of that stuff, but in like like in Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1, half those bosses basically just like cheese themselves.
Yeah.
Well, it's
like
still...
with Sith, you just stand in a corner and half the attacks don't even hit you.
It's pretty shocking to me that it took them, what, 5 games now? Dark Souls 3 is the 5th one, right? So...
Yeah.
Because Bloodborne and Demon Souls... So
I've heard from a few sources that Bloodborne is a lot more refined than all the other games. I would have had a chance to play it if all the housing shit didn't end as it did.
Well,
is that you with Big Homo?
Yeah, that's my pet, Big Homo, by the way.
The only reason Bloodborne is quote unquote more refined is because it's like you have a chance to make a comeback when you're fighting people in that game. Like you can gain your health back. There's a lifesteal is one of the main like gameplay elements that they promote. Like you're supposed to be really aggressive in that game. So it's more that you don't have to use the iframes, even though they are there. With all, like, it's the same kind of boss development as any other Dark Souls game. Like, you have a chance to get back on top, just being like aggressive, playing a little bit differently. You don't have to like avoid everything or be a really defensive player. So I think that's the only different thing when it comes to that.
I think
game.
it's also Bloodborne doesn't have shields, does it?
Nope. They like that's the whole thing with Bloodborne is you're supposed to play really aggressively. That's what they're pushing on you the whole fucking time.
Shields are like From Software's bane. They did not know what to do with shields, so their solution with Dark Souls 3 was to nerf them really, really hard. Because in Dark Souls 1, it's not that difficult to actually have an impenetrable block to the stage that bosses like Artorias can't actually do damage to you ever. Because you can get stamina regeneration items, you have a shit ton of poison stamina. I wasn't even really that high level, and I'm using like all light armor, and I can't remember which shield it was, but you just stand there and let him attack you, and then you drop your shield for half a second when he's done his rotation, because it's all like stall based, turn based.
Yeah.
And then you've got all your stamina back, and you can just block again.
Well, it seemed like the way they nerfed that was actually just nerfing stamina and the way stamina works.
Well, they nerfed shields overall.
Yeah.
So
Well, every other game
stamina
after that,
cost.
like anything you would do that cost stamina, like if you would do something you weren't supposed to do, it would just drain your stamina instantly. I noticed that.
Yeah.
So it seemed like that's what their solution was when it came to nerfing defense.
Yeah, well, it's also especially blocking uses a lot of stamina. Like towards the end of Dark Souls 3, I had quite a sum of stamina plus a ring that gave me stamina, and
that's
something that gave me stamina regen. I think may have been the shield. And even then, blocking was more like it was something you wanted to have up on bosses you were learning, because the collision was so fucked where you would think you wouldn't get hit by something. Pond of Sullivan was really bad for this. You could be standing on the side. Yes, I just one-shotted that harpy, by the way, because elemental force. And you can be standing to kind of like to the side and behind Pond of Sullivan, and there is collision on one of his attacks that will hit way behind the actual sword. And the whole idea of having a shield was just to eat that, because otherwise standing there was just ridiculously safe for you.
Right.
You can also parry him, but I wasn't very good at timing that in that game, so I didn't even bother trying to do that.
Yeah, everybody was trying to be god when it came to pairing in that game, that's for sure. That was like the
Well, it seems to be the only element of the game from what I remember playing Dark Souls 1 that it had a degree of skill that was in real time, but
it's pretty heavy in 3 too.
The timing is different, and then every attack is different. But there's a lot of stuff that's just not parryable either. So
well,
yeah, there's no distinction, which really fucking drives you nuts. Like you can only parry enemies that are the same size as you to begin with most of the time. But you have there's no distinction with you just have to know this stuff. You either have to look it up or just learn it based on failing to parry an enemy 100 times and dying over and over. So there's no way to learn it naturally. And then it's fucked up because in Bloodborne, like the whole thing is you can parry anything. Like you can parry any enemy. It doesn't matter how big they are. You can parry them. So it gets your whole mindset fucked up going into Dark Souls 3 if you played Bloodborne, where you're trying to parry these big guys and you can't do it. Like, it's just stupid.
At least in Dark Souls 3, you can stagger enemies by repeatedly hitting them a lot, which I don't recall that really being a thing before, but I haven't played Dark Souls 2. Everybody tells me avoid it, like the Black Plague.
It's
even
funny.
people who are like really into Dark Souls, they tell me don't play.
I actually think it's the best.
It's probably the best one out of this whole series.
It's the most gamey one out of all three of them. Like
for sure.
People hate it because of how un-Dark Souls the second one is. I don't even know what makes it it's just more.
No, I mean it still seems retarded in many respects, but it's definitely. I would say it was way more enjoyable to me to play that game than it was to play the second one. Or, I mean the first one, and probably the third one as well. So, still a lot of problems with it.
3?
I played a little bit of it. I played enough to turn myself into Mark's tombstone or something.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That was a good video.
A third of the way through it. Actually, I would say like you probably got technically like halfway through it because that game snowballs. Once you get to like the point where you're all right. Like you just kind of blaze through the rest of the game.
Really?
Yeah.
Doesn't
We
I don't know,
played
that's
for
what
like
was for
one.
me.
We played for 2 streams. That was it. It was like 3 hours.
That was like 10 hours. Yeah.
Oh shit! Really?
Yeah.
Didn't even know.
I was looking back because after I played Dark Souls 3 and I was reviewing it, I looked back to my Dark Souls 1 run because I was actually kind of because it'd been so long since I played it. I actually kind of wanted to see what different was. In Dark Souls 1, I realized like the vast majority of the game, I'm actually just standing there letting things hit me and I'm just beating their faces in and like stun locking half the bosses. Like any time I had problems in that game was because I tried to do something cute. Really, like 90% of the time, I win things just by taking out the Zwee Hander and just standing there and hitting them with it, and they just get stun locked and die. Like that's how I killed Oreo and S'mores. That's how I killed the spider boss by shooting her with arrows and stun locking her.
Oh, that one's busted. Yeah.
There's a lot of bosses I just stood underneath and just swung my sword at them until they died.
That's the Dark Souls boss philosophy. You stand under them and swing, and that
Yeah.
that
So
actually
dumb.
reigns true with a lot of the bosses in 3 too. So
Yeah. Three is a little bit
2.
more refined. Like when I played Dark Souls 1, it was obviously like a complete shit tier game. Like who the fuck would ever release this? Dark Souls 3 was more like it was kind of like the God of War of Dark Souls. Like it was bad, but it wasn't like bad enough for me to say, "Hey, this is a really bad game." It's more like this is like an untested alpha. They could come in and patch up a lot of things and it'll come out better. The controls felt a little bit better. The weapons and stuff were a lot better balanced than Dark Souls 1, where normal damage reigns supreme above all else by far, and except for maybe like spells and stuff. And the bosses overall were better but as the fight designs, but they were so out of ideas in that game.
Yeah.
They were so out of ideas. Almost all the bosses amount to big undead guy with a flaming sword, and they all amount to basically the same interaction. Which I've heard that Bloodborne is better in that regard as well. Like they hadn't run out of ideas. They had some bosses in there that are at least like visually distinct from one another.
yeah, I
but
was just
Dark
about
Souls
to say
3
like conceptually, like they're not like completely drained from ideas, but it's like the same gameplay mechanics with every boss pretty much. There's like 3 different types, and it's the same thing every time. Like there's no variation from what I played. I beat the game, got the quote unquote true ending with the true final boss. It's pretty much like the same. I would even say 2 types of bosses. You have like the big boss and player sized boss, and it's like the same kind of fight every time, just varying in difficulty.
No, the only reason they have the big size bosses is that they can justify more huge sweeping attacks. Like Dark Souls 1, I think in overall, like the boss concepts were better. I don't think the execution was nearly as good because so many of them were so mind-numbingly easy, even for me, where I was literally just standing there just swinging with my sword. Or they were just incredibly unbalanced, like the Capra Demon, where you phase in and you have like maybe a second or 2 to react before you get dogpiled, literally, and then you just like get stun locked to death.
And
So
it seemed pretty inconsistent too, with what would
Yeah.
like your hit boxes and what was going to land and what wasn't. Like it was a lot of fucking like it felt unfair most of the time, which is really shitty for a game like that. You would think that everything is so like the whole design philosophy behind that game. You would think everything is supposed to be like seem fair. Like this isn't something I should be aggravated. Like this isn't something that should be unfair. It should be like, all right, now I know what I have to do. I have to go back and do this and avoid it in this way. Maybe roll in a different like there's a lot of stuff like especially with those big fucking demons that do their ass stomp or it's just bullshit where you would get hit. Like you shouldn't be getting hit here. It's like you're way out of their bounds. You're still getting hit. You're in a place where they don't have some visual fucking animation. Some of their shitty particle effects that are flashing over you where it seems like you wouldn't get hit, but you would get hit anyway, and it could go the other way around with any other boss.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
a big part of like AI and general challenge is always communicating with the player, and you don't necessarily want to make things like really telegraphed like StarCraft these bosses, but you also you want to make sure that the player has enough information so that it doesn't feel like you've basically downgraded the game to a trial and error like whatever the fuck.
Exactly.
You don't want it to be trial and error, but you do want there to be some element of like a learning procedure. So you communicate information to the player learns based on the information that you've communicated to them and their own actions and the result of those actions. Like, oh, I did something good because I won, or I did something suboptimally. I played worse than I should, or I used a different tactic that didn't actually work out. And now I got to see if I can change strategies or play better with that same strategy. But there's really nothing about that in a lot of the modern games. Even Dark Souls, I think, has a lot of you're railroaded into certain strategies where you can only do certain things, like rolling for iframes and
you either have to roll for iframes or cheese the boss. That's
right.
Pretty much your option.
Then you end up with this game that is supposedly really hard, but you can neutralize most of the challenge with specific responses. And I think there's an extent where something should be abusable, like where you can abuse something in a sense, but there's also a pretty large extent where the player should be able to experiment with a bunch of different strategies and figure out what fits their playstyle, how they can best express their own skill, or shit like that should be common sense, I would think, but I really haven't found a lot of it.
I think that the whole argument of Dark Souls being a hard game, it stems from the prospect of being punished. So if you do something, you try a strategy, you try a build or something, and it doesn't work out, you die. It's really simple. And obviously, to people like us, who are older for the most part, I assume, or at least people who have played games like, Brood War or whatever, where, a whole part of the game is devising strategies and stuff and going through the learning process if it doesn't work and stuff like that, that's not really anything new at all. So Dark Souls really doesn't mean anything to us at all. It's not a unique experience. It's not a unique title. It's not really distinctive in any shape or form. The only really noteworthy thing that sticks to me with Dark Souls is aesthetically, it's one of the only games that's come out in a while that isn't using World of Warcraft's super bland color style.
Sure.
But when you play games today, like say StarCraft 2 and Diablo 3 and stuff, their entire purpose is just to hold your hand and give you participation awards. Dark Souls doesn't do that. Dark Souls is very, for better or for worse, it's very plain. It's very, in many ways, undeveloped, but it's also very raw in the sense that, there is no real mechanism for handholding in that game other than phantoms and stuff like that. So you will commonly find yourself trying to figure out what you're doing, especially if you're not really good at action RPGs, and dying incessantly and thinking, wow, this is a hard game. But really all that's happening is that you're just being punished for not knowing what you're doing, which has been a staple of gaming forever until about the last 10 years, especially in the West, where, look at God of War. God of War is obviously a clone of Devil May Cry. And Devil May Cry 1, I don't know if you've played it, but it was heavily criticized for being too difficult. It was very heavily criticized in the West for being too difficult of a game. Now, there is some stuff in Devil May Cry that gave me some problems, but it wasn't really that bad of a game at all. It was just sort of like the standard for me. And Devil May Cry 3 was a much different story, which is why it's still basically a niche title. And it was really strange because nothing in Devil May Cry really struck me out, at least in the first title, as being really this is going to give casuals a lot of problems, because it's just a couple bosses and some trash monsters and some walking around back and forth. It was pretty simple stuff.
Yeah,
but that's because things were very different back then in terms of the titles that were being released. You had titles like God Hand, I've been told, is reasonable. Vanquish as well, which I need to play. And, the PS2 and PS1 still had some very challenging titles on them. But now, today, you've got games where basically the whole goal of the game is to get achievements. And how do you get achievements? You kill a boss or explore an area or enter a title screen or something like that. A lot of people play these games, and I mentioned this with loot boxes. People open loot boxes just to open them. People play it for the ceremony. This is what companies like Blizzard and Riot call it. It's called a ceremony. The whole screen shaking stuff flashing around.
Yeah. The most highly produced part of the game, by the way. They put the most effort into that.
When you think about budget, a lot of the budget goes into marketing, and a tremendous amount of budget goes into research on abusing psychology. And this is where the ceremony thing comes from. It comes from what someone described to me as an adrenaline addiction. It's exactly the same thing as gambling. And sort of similar, rushes. You get a rush for defeating an opponent, well, that takes effort, and not everybody's going to succeed, so not everybody's going to feel that rush. So the better idea is just to give everybody participation awards.
Yeah.
And
So
you know, so
that.
you can see this again way back to God of War versus Devil May Cry. Devil May Cry had bosses and stuff that, you know, to me, they at the time, because I'd already played God of War and all this other shit, they weren't really standout to me. It was an interesting game. I'd say it was a good game, but there wasn't like anything in it that really, like, at least at the baseline difficulty I had available, was super challenging to me. But in God of War, and this is really funny because God of War has two polarities here. The first is God of War didn't want difficult bosses. They wanted quick time events. God of War didn't want exploration. They wanted quick time events and grind. But because they were so obsessed with filling things with all this arbitrary Simon Says bullshit and wasting your time rather than actually making a game, there are many portions in God of War where things become monstrously time wasting and frustrating as a result of so many of their other game systems being undeveloped, where you actually can spend hours and hours and hours getting stuck on stuff just because of the way things work. Like, for example, I don't know if you guys have watched or played God of War 1, but I'll bring up the Harpy Rolling Pin Room. So, if you're not familiar, I'll just quickly go through this for you because I want to give you an example of the things these developers do and get praised for. So you have a room. It's got flying units in it that are very hard to hit. It's got respawning archers that don't take any damage from environmental effects. So there's rolling pins that will deal damage to you if you hit them. There's conveyor belts. So you're in a 3D game with conveyor belts and other platforming stuff. So that's already a recipe for disaster because
Is
it's
this the platforming section where if you fall down? I think I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, you don't fall down here, but if you stand on the platforms, there will be fire spouts that appear. These fire spouts will one-shot you. By the way, the fire spouts are horizontal. They come from a hole in the wall, but their collision is infinitely high on Z, so you can't jump over them. You can't like jump up and try to avoid them. So in order to actually get through that room, you have to execute it like almost pixel perfect. You have to kill precisely these monsters in this way, use your mana in precisely that way. And to figure that out is a massive exercise in frustration because it's basically you flailing around helplessly, getting one-shotted and stun-locked incessantly, and having to smash quick time events over and over and over again. And like, it's like the antithesis of game design. You want something to be challenging, but you don't want something to be a chore. And this was like an exercise of running your dick across a cheese grater. There's several things in God of War that are like that. And then the rest of it is just quick time events.
They almost have the exact same kind of scenario in 3, by the way, where there's the cube puzzle. Like this
yeah.
You remember that section? It's like the exact same kind of thing where you have to ride on harpies, and if you have no idea it's gonna happen, but you have a like one-shot spikes, like you're playing fucking Mega Man. And if you don't ride a harpy at a specific point and like continue riding them up until the spikes go away, you just get one-shotted. And if you die, you have to replay the whole section over, which is like a 30-minute thing. It's fucking nuts.
That whole box area is literally Sony going to the God of War developers and saying, "Hey, can you make the game longer?" Developers being like, "Yeah, let's add some grind."
We need a labyrinth.
What I remember about God of War Ascension is two things, or God of War 3 rather. I'll talk about Ascension in a moment because that game's a fucking disaster, even by God of War standards. So there's the box, and you have to kill a puppy, I think, before or after you go to the box. It's in the puppy. I think it's in the box. It shoots exploding puppies. So I played this. This was, I believe, when I was still using Virtual Dub to play from my capture card. Virtual Dub is okay at encoding videos. It's not good at being used as an input, but it was better than the Blackmagic Media Express I was using. So I had about... The input delay at the best of times was like maybe like a quarter of a second, something like that. And in God of War 3, that meant you could not block the super fast power attack that came out of that boss. And that meant I spent close to 3 hours on that boss, actually, because you had to have the utmost perfect execution to compensate for the RNG of randomly being hit by these basically unavoidable attacks during the first phase.
Yeah.
And then there's the Goatsy men, and
those guys were literally the worst.
They were bad. And then there was the final boss, where I actually ended up turning down the difficulty on that one because I got so fed up of, like, because basically God of War is one of those American games where you turn on the difficulty and all it does is just make stats higher. Things don't become smarter.
You literally
things
just
don't
got to
become
wail
faster.
on the guy for like 15 minutes to get into the second phase. That's the only
not
difference
even
in
an
difficulty.
exaggeration.
It's literally 15 minutes, yeah, and that's just like for the first area that you're in, and then you go to like 3 different areas for the fight. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, stat scaling in God of War is pretty similar to when you turn up the difficulty in, what was that? Dante's Inferno, right?
Yeah, it's very similar. Except this is just as absurd in the boss because the boss summons dupes of himself. This is where I turn up the difficulty is when I realize that if a dupe touches you, it's like almost impossible to avoid them while you're chiseling down this guy's health, maybe like a pixel every 10, 20 seconds. If a dupe hits you with an ability, it'll do over 3/4 of your health.
And you have to like, the dupes all have like health too, so you, like they have like the same kind of health as him. So you have to like, you have to kill all these duplicates, and they give you like one little thing of health for each one, and it takes like 30 minutes just to get through that phase, and it's just.
That was when I turned it down because I already spent so many hours in the first phase chiseling down his health. I felt like I played like a masturbation marathon, and at that stage I was like, well, I just want to get through this shitty game. So, and then like you turn down the difficulty by a notch, and he loses like over half of his health.
Yeah, it cuts down the fight by like an hour. That's not an exaggeration. It's literally like if you go from like hard to normal, it's literally like an hour off your game time. That like any boss in that game, well, not any of them. Like the QTE ones are pretty standard, but any other boss that has a health bar that you have to chisel down gets cut down by like a half hour to an hour based on which boss you're fighting. Like switching the difficulty, it's crazy.
Meanwhile, in DMC3, things don't really have that much health even on the high difficulties. It makes them really aggressive. It gives some enemies devil triggers so they're more CC resistant and more aggressive and stuff like that. Like DMC3 has problems with it. Like it still has some telegraphic bosses in it which definitely don't belong in an ARPG, but overall it is a game unlike God of War.
It's a better overall package.
From what I played all these DMC games, and like the difficulty in 3, I believe that's the one where like they just spam you basically when you turn up the difficulty. Like they will fucking not lay on. They will lay on you all the time. So it's like
they're pretty aggressive.
I would rather have that than
Have you played God of War Ascension?
That's the only God of War I haven't played.
So God of War Ascension. I want to tell you guys something about God of War Ascension. That's kind of an aside, but I think you guys should know about it. So God of War Ascension shipped with 2 bugs, and probably a lot more I didn't encounter, but 2 bugs that are very major. So the first bug is there's a dual boss. He actually isn't that bad of a boss. And he, I forget his name, but he's in, he has like a fetus attached to his face or something. And if you throw a rock at him during a phase transition, he doesn't leave the phase transition. You have to reload the game. So that's consistent. That's consistent. But that's actually not the most severe of these bugs. The other bug is more severe. So there's an area a lot like the Pandora's box that you're forced to just run around and waste your time in. And once you have finished that, you go to a boss against the same Chimera you have fought against like another 3 or 4 times in the game so far. And you fall down into like this temple area, and then you're supposed to kill him and proceed. So if you die or reload here for any reason, you will load into a bugged fight now with chapter select or continue game or anything that loads you into this area loads you into a Chimera with floating pieces of the mesh in the air because it didn't activate to hide them. The music is disabled, the camera's broken, the whole cinematic sequence for you to get in there is broken. Like some script change didn't fire. If you push the Chimera off screen, its AI shuts down. If you perform a QTE on it when it's in there, you get a screen full of just back faces and stuff. And to top it all off, you can kill the Chimera and you won't be able to proceed. So what you actually have to do is to reload the previous chapter, go through that entire sequence again, which is like a massive gauntlet.
Yeah.
And then kill the Chimera without dying in there.
Especially on harder difficulties. That's like 3 or 4 hours of progress potentially gone. Reloading an entire section. That's insane.
So those bugs shipped with the game. They're 100% reproducible, and
They never got patched.
yeah, I think they may have gotten patched.
Really?
Like I would hope they got patched, but that's like beside the point. You shipped the game with 2 colossal ultra severe bugs I ran into in my first playthrough that I was actually like inhibited by on both accounts by them being so consistent. Like that, like there's actually no excuse for that. There is no excuse for that. Someone wasn't doing their job.
Well, I think
Either
it was
they
the first
intentionally
God
didn't
of War
QA
that
it.
had some element of like if you run through a phase fast enough and some enemies get their AI called, so they just freeze somewhere.
Yep.
Was that the
Oh
first
yeah,
one?
you remember that? Where that puppy? Yeah,
Yeah.
that was something it
dog.
consistently produced as well. Of course, this is the PS2, so you can't just patch the game because you wanted to push it out a day earlier. So yeah, there's maybe it was God of War 2. Actually, both of them may have that. I don't know, but I think it was in God of War 2. It was where 2 Cyclops are. Before the Cyclops spawn, you run around. There's a crane. There's for some reason, if you go up to the crane immediately, the dogs that spawn up there don't activate their AI, and it's kind of interesting because you get to like grab them and they'll like auto retaliate and stuff, and you kind of get to see like how much of the game is actually AI and how much of it is just scripted responses, and it's probably like 90% scripted responses to stuff. Even some
Probably. Yeah. Well,
inbreeding. Like it's not really
almost-
too surprising, but
Yeah, I would like, especially with God, anywhere beyond God of War 1, I would expect that, because that's when it got QTE. Like the whole game was just QTE based at
Yeah.
that point.
God of War 3 had a little less QTEs in it. I don't think the boxes needed you to smash a button to open them, but then you went
that
into
just
God of War
reminds me
Ascension.
of Deadly Premonition. In that game, you have to mash buttons to move boxes from one point of the room to the other.
Yeah,
God.
the section that didn't even work.
God of
You
War
like-
Ascension was actually a B team that made it. So not simply was it like it had some really, really toxic fights in it, but it also had more QTEs in it and really amazing bugs like the chains. This bug they never had in any other of their games, but now they did, where the chains would just randomly stretch across the screen.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna say, like, I've seen it in God of War 3 where your chains would snap to stuff and then stretch around when you would.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is like they just randomly are just all across the screen. Like the ribbon just breaks completely. And there was bugs like the Gutsy men were like they're snapping through animations or something. There was a lot of really bizarre.
That's really shit too. In an ARPG, you can't be having your enemies snap through animations. You can't have them be unreadable. That's like the biggest note, especially if you're playing on a higher difficulty. You're fucked. You can't read what your enemies are doing. They're just snapping around. Like you could that's like that would be it for me. I wouldn't be able to play that game anymore if I got killed because of something like that. Lost an hour of progress. I'm not playing that game ever again.
That's pretty bad. So we've covered Dark Souls, God of War. So like generally ARPGs and shit. We've done some work with that. That's fantastic. But how does this translate to compared to your experiences with something like Brood War or any like strategy games? Basically, I know Nekron will have more to say on that since he's actually played strategy games. But like in general, what do you look at for difficulty in a RTS, Nekron? What quantifies a well-balanced set of difficulty?
Well, that's sort of a hard question to answer for me because I know that my standards for
Well, it doesn't have to reflect anybody else. Just whatever you like.
Yeah, so I think that, like, very broadly, I like challenges where I'm basically forced to abuse the game to some degree.
How do you mean?
So, let's say that do you remember how among the first times around when I actually got pretty far in Cosmet 5? Do you remember how I played the map?
Not really.
So
You can talk about it
had-
so that everybody else knows.
I had one playthrough when at the start of the mission, when you're like surrounded by enemy forces and stuff, I expanded to the enemy base using sunken colonies because sunken colonies with upgrades are broken.
Right.
So I like really, I think abused the fact that sunken colonies were stronger than usual, and then based my strategy off of that. And for like being resource efficient and taking expansions, I had a control group of 12 queens. That would, well, instantly kill most defenses, where I would just spam ruling like 12 dragons. And because of that, I would have more resources and storage than presumed.
Right. So because you're able to basically perpetually kill units with queens, you only had to
so it's
pay
like
the upfront
really
cost of the queen.
cute and enjoyable for me to find like various ways to do something that the map creator probably hasn't anticipated when it comes to resource management or dealing with problems set up before me. But also, I don't really mind like trying and failing at finding this stuff. So I can try a map for 12 times, and probably I won't be as frustrated as some people I know.
Yeah, I wonder who you could be talking about.
And I also don't. So it's really like easy to see a big attack and say that it's unfair or that it's unbeatable. And actually, a lot of the time when you're playing something for the first time, it might seem unbeatable. Like Prologue was playing my map earlier today when after a set of ground attacks, he was attacked by 4 fully upgraded battlecruisers, and he obviously stated that there was like no way for him to prepare for that attack, and that's true. Like the only way he could have known that he will be attacked by battlecruisers if he has played the map in the past.
Right.
So
So
this
I would have
basically
needed
means
prior knowledge.
yeah. So you either need to be way over the intended difficulty. Like you need to be way better than anticipated to have no problems with that. Like you could have been expected to have enough leeway to deal with that anyway.
Yeah, it depends
right?
on my army comp. So
Yeah.
I went for anti-ground mostly, and
Yeah.
because of that, I was punished by air.
That's absolutely like reinforced by the way the map's designed, because you are faced with light units that are pretty bad against the ultras. You have like a lot of ways to use ultras early in the map, whereas hydraulics are significantly worse against marines and
Right.
bio in general. But I don't know. I wouldn't mind losing. I wouldn't mind losing against an attack like that, because I don't mind retrying. Right? It's not as frustrating to me to retry doing something from zero than it is for some other people. Maybe that's because I have played MOBAs for a lot of my life, since like 8 years or something. And in MOBAs, basically every game you begin is like something entirely new, right?
I guess, yeah, you're up against very different, distinct challenges by comparison.
Yeah. I don't even remember where I was going.
Well, how does this pertain? So you don't mind basically being failed out by a skill check?
Yeah, I don't mind that.
Or it's not even really a skill check in this context, but you don't really mind that compared to your. So what is your ideal map then by that circumstance? Like, what is your ideal challenge from an RTS standpoint, or an ideal if there's multiple? Because presumably there would be.
Well, I can give concrete maps, but it's hard to like name an example theoretically, because I have to see how something plays out. An ideal map though is it's certainly something that's not too tiring, because I don't mind retrying, right? We established that. But I do mind if the map is like extremely not even punishing, but we had this problem in Cosmet too, where you are constantly assaulted by something, like without any breaks. So what I prefer to that is if you're attacked by big attacks every now and then. And I think that's like way more both fair and reasonable to the player, that you don't expect them to pay attention 24/7, because that's, well, nobody can constantly keep their attention up in a game, especially if you have to like multitask, because you have to micro and macro simultaneously in Brood War. So then you have like periods when literally nothing happens and the player can just chill for a moment and regain their composure before the next attack. And it's also like pretty important for you don't really ever feel safe moving out in a map that constantly faces you with small waves of enemy units, because the game is fast enough that you can like have your entire mineral line shoot up by, I don't know, 3 or 4 scouts. So instead of moving out, you have to like keep hydras in your mineral line and fuck around with that. And as opposed to a map where you would be attacked once every, let's say, 5 or 3 minutes, when after you've been attacked, you know that there's a window of opportunity for you, where you not only can move out without being attacked because the enemy just attacked you, but the enemy sources are also diminished because they haven't presumably yet replenished their guards and defense units that they send to attack you.
So you prefer a challenge that comes from the idea of balancing these many elements of the RTS. So basically, what I think you're getting at is you want an RTS that actually forces you to engage in all functions of the RTS. So macroing, resource management, expanding, defending, attacking, and etc.
And also, something extremely big you like partially omitted is that I like an RTS that forces you to use every single of its assets. So you have an opportunity to use queens, you have an opportunity to use defilers, you have an opportunity to use lightning hydras.
Yeah, so it depends. It basically leaves the window open for you to have your own set of
you have a lot of possibilities.
Right. Okay. Well, what do you guys think about the idea of the ideal RTS, or even I know for example?
I think you could like probably refine this to any game. Like the whole like reason you would have fun playing a game, especially when it comes to RTSs, is you want to be like pushing your limits when it comes to like what you can do in the game to make it more like to push yourself to the limits, push yourself to like do more skillful things, especially with RTSs. Like you have all this different stuff that you can do, and you can push like you have to push, like you have to micro, macro, do all this stuff, do like use specific units in ways, like counter all these other units, do all this stuff, like push armies in a certain way, or like how you counterattack. Like it's something you can say about any game where you want to be battling within the game's mechanics and not battling like the game itself. Almost like you don't want to be like fighting a fucking you don't want to literally be fighting the game itself. You want to be fighting within the game's elements, you know? Like you don't want to be fucking aggravated by the game's like limitations, or like
there is stuff within the remit of the game itself that you could draw a parallel. So for example, Nekron mentioned that he doesn't like when you have constant pressure, but another way you could articulate this is if you have an enemy base that is just really difficult to attack, then that obviously doesn't, like, it's basically impossible to break through unless you spend 3 hours mining out everything and sending in 200 max supply armies over and over again. That's basically the equivalent to chipping away at some ARPG boss's health for 10 hours and only getting like halfway done or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Same kind of thing. Where it's just you're fighting the instead of feeling like you're actually getting better at the game and learning. You're not really learning. You're just doing what the game is constraining you to do, and you don't feel like there's any other option.
Right. So I think basically in every game there should be some element of like a large focus on, okay, I can do this. I the player can execute these strategies. I like playing this play style. I like building 10 queens and broodlinging people, or I like using defilers. Yeah.
Like you have options to consider, whereas like you have to do one thing, and if you don't do this one thing, then you're fucked. You have to either do it the way it's designed, like you have to play it in a very specific way, or you're fucked. Like that's not something that you look for in game design, I guess. Like I don't know.
It's a very modern mindset behind most games anyways. You do it the way the developer intended, or you don't do it at all.
Yeah, well, if you
Yeah,
go
and-
off the beaten path of what the developer had intended for you, basically, like, this is why in StarCraft 2 and a lot of those missions where you see, like, oh, now I can build tanks. It doesn't end with the fact that you click on your factory, you see that tanks are available, or you start with a tank and you think, oh, I have tanks now. That must mean that indicates that I can use tanks. So I'll build a factory and check it out, like basically what happens in Brood War. Because there's no real ceremony for introducing some new units. In Brood War there is, but for the most part it's like, oh, you just spawn with a unit and you know, like, this is your starting base. In this base is included a unit. You know that you can build that unit because you click on the factory and it says, oh, you can build a tank now. In StarCraft 2 it's like tanks show up in a cutscene and then they siege mode and then they attack stuff, and that's whatever. I mean, you can do that, but then after that you click on the factory and there's a flashing icon behind the siege tank button because they really want you to know that you can build siege tanks, or you should build siege tanks.
Yeah,
you can't build anything but siege
build
tanks.
sieged units.
Yeah,
Well,
you must build these tanks now, by the way.
They'd be very
The thing is-
effective against every unit in this mission.
Yeah,
Build
that's right.
them.
Like in StarCraft 2, most of them, what happens is that the unit that's introduced is like automatically wins the mission. Basically, you don't need to build anything.
Yeah, you just
more.
mass that unit, more or less.
Yeah.
very
But in
quick.
Brood War, for example, if you only like the powers are the most effective in Zerg 4-6, where they are introduced, for example, and lurkers perhaps aren't also the most effective in.
Oh yeah, they're not
Zerg 5.
effective in Zerg 5. That, like, I mean, they are for defense or whatever, but you don't take them with you when you attack most of the time.
Yeah.
You don't have access to defilers, so there's no real reason to take them against tanks.
That's like the antithesis of RTS, by the way. You're taking the S out of RTS. Like, it's a complete fuck. You're like, the whole point is you're supposed to be able to use strategy and do like have your own
determine what
methods
you
of-
like and what.
There is
That's
no
the design of StarCraft 2, man. It's designed
No.
to take out the thinking aspect. This is what I mean by participation awards. Everybody can
Hey.
build siege tanks.
Yeah,
Everybody
Pat.
can
They're
A big
fake
problem.
patting you on the back.
A big problem with StarCraft 2 is also how it's designed, how the defense of enemies bases are designed, which is that it's basically not designed at all. They just have static units.
It doesn't. You can't even access the defense functions in StarCraft 2's editor as it is.
Yeah.
You have to pull in the natives from Melee, and then use that, which is like entirely indecipherable for the most part, anyways.
So there's like no, you aren't discouraged from building only Void Race because there's no way the enemy will counter it. They will just have whatever units they had, and they won't build more like I have. No
Yeah, they
idea
don't
how
react to player
Vikings.
inputs, which is like
Yeah.
an added step to the insult of you playing StarCraft 2 and trying to be good at the game. Like, you don't have to be good at the game. You just
Nope.
have to follow the instructions the developers left for you, which is actually basically taking the whole idea that the game is interactive in the first place out of the equation, I think.
You
Like, if you
might as well have a strategy guide for it at that point. Like, it's
Yeah.
fucking stupid.
I played a lot of bad RTSs. Like, I definitely wouldn't consider Armies of Exegos campaign really that great.
yeah.
I played some of Dragon Shard, and that wasn't that great either. But none of them are as bad as StarCraft 2. Just by extended to the fact that all the enemy bases are basically a time gate. They're not defended by anything. The AI just spawns units and waypoints them into you, and then that's it. Like,
Yeah.
the design for the campaigns is almost as bad as the writing.
I was watching a playthrough of Legacy of the Void recently, and I was really shocked that the guy playing it said that, well, I know that units spawn behind this base, so but I built a Nexus here and I don't think they will attack it. And I was thinking that he's joking because like he showed that units spawn on top of a ramp that's like pretty visible if you have a building nearby. But like half a minute later, literally just 3 dragons and a hybrid just show up out of nowhere and start going to his main base.
And they
I
ignored the
remember- I
Nexus
think-
too. That's right.
May have been the second or third Zeratul mission in Wings of Liberty, where there's a guy next to the crystals, the hybrid,
Yeah.
and you're
Mara.
supposed to like kill them or the crystals or something. And I just stuck like 2 stalkers there, and just, you know, he just spawns whatever. I've like no units elsewhere on the map, and besides the stalkers, just like slowly killing his shit, and I just kill it and win the mission. And I'm like, well, that was not supposed to happen.
Oh no. Yeah, well, the other thing is that this dumb, like, don't ever deviate from our path method of game design, quote unquote, is really, really bad for challenge. In the same breath, we can talk about how dumb it is and how goofy it is and how it takes any way of like expressing skill out of the equation. But at the same
As someone
time,
who
it's
plays
also
League of
not
Legends.
challenging.
You probably know all about that.
Well, trust me, have seen enough of that game to last me quite a while.
League is really bad for that. League is really horrible for that. If you do something Riot or you build something Riot doesn't want you to build, or you play something in a lane Riot doesn't think you should be doing, they're gonna just step right in and be like, "No, you can't do that. You're banned."
Well,
What's
actually,
the point
Nekron
of
has a
building
good
at that point?
Nekron has a good response to this.
I don't think I agree with this statement. Over the years, there has been a lot of stuff that's really abusable to the average player that Riot has noticed or hasn't cared about enough to remove from the game. And even now, mostly because of the runes that everyone seems to hate, but there's a lot of ways you can find something and abuse it in such an original way that probably either no one plays it or barely no one's.
Yeah, but once Riot
plays it.
discovers it, then it's gone.
Yeah,
for example,
sure.
the guy who played Singe support and bottom
But
has a
then,
grade of like 75% or something. But you don't play Singe support. I don't care if you're successful, you're banned.
yeah, so the
I forgot
usual
about that.
go-to excuse is that the guy doesn't communicate with his team or whatever, which is probably a good enough excuse in their terms to ban somebody.
Yeah, but I mean, you could say that about fucking everybody. What do you mean he doesn't communicate? He has this copy paste that he pastes in the chat, and he's like, by the way, I play Singe support.
Singed main here.
Yeah, Singe support main here. I have 75% win rate. I've basically haven't lost a game this century. Let me play my champion, please. Reported.
I don't think they're quite as bad as at keeping possibilities up.
Well, I mean,
as
you
his
play
lane does.
basically like you're an AP Varus bot lane main, so you know a fair bit about like how
Yeah, and I also know that the designer of this champion had intended for this playstyle to exist.
Yeah, well, so
Well,
I mean, it's probably by design, I guess.
They probably wouldn't intend that anymore. I'm sure they wouldn't develop a champion like that anymore. That's for sure.
Well, lately,
Yeah.
Ornn has been being played like top lane and jungle and support, and I think they're trying to get him out of the jungle or something. Like
I'm
I've
sure
seen some
they'll
changes.
update him and make him.
Like, see, the
they'll
thing is,
force
okay.
him into a lane.
See,
Like,
they
the
don't actually. A lot of the cases now, they don't really nerf certain options as much. Like
Yeah.
basically, what they do is they buff him in the roles that they want him to be seen more in, and so
Yeah.
you'll still have the opportunity to play him in those off meta roles, but likely, there's like a social. Okay, so for one, you win more if you play him in the other roles. So
Yeah, he's
there's less of a
optimized in that-
yeah. So there's
in
less of
one
an
role they want you to
incentive
play, yeah.
at that point to actually play. Where the there's more of an incentive to play him in those other roles, and then there's the social aspect of the game where everybody's going to be like, "What the fuck are you doing if you're playing him jungle?" When didn't you see that he just got buffed top and support or whatever?
It's funny you say social because it's also like Riot will straight up fuck you over if you play him in other roles and people report. They will just ban you or something. Like they don't give a fuck, or their automated system will punish you for doing anything out of the norm. So it doesn't really matter.
I have never been banned and I heard a lot of people going after me because
What elo
I'm
do you play at?
Between silver and diamond.
Wow, that's a pretty large.
Wow, that's pretty
Yeah.
big. You might as well have
But
said.
it's like until
I used
you
to be
reach like
silver, I used
masters,
to be
you can
diamond.
basically play anything anywhere and win. Because most people are really bad.
Yeah, I guess.
Because
Yeah.
I've seen like Blitzcrank, AP Blitzcrank top in Diamond was destroying. And I've seen like AP Tristana and like all these
Oh,
other
because
bizarre things.
When a skill gap is big enough, you can get away with a lot of shit because you
Yeah,
can
I was-
really use
Well,
any mistakes against
I,
him.
I was making my next video about Nasus jungle, so I know what you're
It's
talking about.
all about punishing mistakes, and
Yeah.
some of those builds and some of those champions are really, 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 really good at punishing mistakes. Like AP Blitzcrank does massive amount of burst damage.
Yeah.
And has all
Yeah,
the
if
season
you
on
get
top of it.
hooked, which is like the whole idea is like if you have to get hooked for it to happen. So if you don't,
Yeah.
like that is like the one mistake that will just fuck you, basically.
So
Yeah.
the whole idea is, especially for stuff like AP Blitzcrank and stuff like that, all these weird things, is you get an early lead off of someone making a mistake, and then you snowball off of that, and then nobody can do anything because if someone comes in range, you just blow them up instantly,
Yeah.
and then the game just ends before it reaches the point where the team fights even happen.
It's also worth noting that I think that a lot of these builds aren't like necessarily worse in higher elo. the thing is that they can be first counterpicked.
People will know how to deal with them more.
Specifically, yeah.
Their mechanics will be better.
And the second thing is that they might be useless in competitive play because the skill set they require is, for example, completely like.
When you enter
opposite.
actual like competitive team beat
Yeah.
team, it's basically an entirely different game that you're playing.
Yeah.
Oh, did they ever add that back, by the way? Can you actually play 5v5
No,
now?
you can play Flex 5v5,
Oh, yeah,
but it's
yeah.
not.
Yeah, it's
They
not
were
the same.
talking about a team thing, but I don't think it's
I don't
implemented yet.
Alright, I'll get into that when I get back. I have to go to the
No.
bathroom real quick.
How long has this game been out? Like, how long has that not been implemented? Are you
A long
fucking?
time.
Yeah, are
A
you
long
kidding me?
years.
It's been like 2
No,
years.
it was implemented in the past.
Yeah,
They've,
it
they've
existed
had it
before,
They
removed it.
Last time I played, they had it, and then I stopped playing when they removed it, and they still don't have it back, and that was 2+ years ago. That's insane. These I don't know, League is quite. I don't know. They
I think
seem
it's
a
really
lot-
something else.
Yeah, the system they have going there is something. I don't even know how to explain. Like they really will punish you for not doing exactly what they want you to do. And it seems like it's been like that for quite a while, ever since the tribunal disappeared. And they've had their bots.
They really want you to use their shop though, and their loot boxes.
Oh yeah, their loot boxes. That's the best part of their game, by the way. Highest frame rate in loot boxes.
Yeah.
You can't get a higher frame rate in a game, but for some reason the loot boxes work flawlessly. It's almost a beautiful system. That's kind of odd, huh?
Hey guys, all this stuff is still busted. We still haven't hired a writer or a game designer yet. But we added more flair to the ceremony when you open a loot box.
Yeah, exactly. Remember when they started like retconning their own writing and like
Yeah,
changing it on the
They're still doing it. And all their retcons are so fucking bad. Like,
yeah,
some of their
they're
old writing really,
retconning their
like,
retcons. Like
it wasn't even like their writing wasn't ever really like creative or anything, but it was like, you know, like reasonable. Like it was just like a little background blurb, and it made sense. And then they suddenly were like, we don't want League of Legends to be about a League of Legends anymore. We're gonna add in some of that edge, some of that Metzen brand edge. And then they started adding in Darken and Shadow Assassin and Void.
Yeah, as soon as they added Jin to the game, the mysterious assassin. They started adding
Don't
that.
say that.
That's what he is.
No.
The assassin of many names.
I think like the most Metzen thing in that game is Kane. Spelled with a Y. The Darken
Yeah, and
Shadow Assassin.
what he does is you can morph him from, you can either make him a good guy, anti-hero edge man, or a fucking evil villain void man.
This is a lie. I
it's
haven't
true.
played League long enough to know if you're telling the truth or not.
It's real, and of course he's like, I point and click and do % health damage, like all this other shit in the game, and I'm invulnerable and pass through walls and shit.
Oh yeah,
like,
everything is a
he's
gap
not
closer,
just
everything is a
retarded as a
fucking...
writing concept. He's also like one of the most toxic heroes they made in a while.
Yeah, that's the other thing I started noticing about League. Like, if your champion doesn't have mobility, you're a piece of shit. You might as well not play the
You
game.
have a checklist. You need to do % health. You need to have a gap closer. And
And
then
you need to have some crowd
you need to have
control.
CC.
Yeah.
And everything
It's-
fucking slows. And Blizzard
Yeah.
is like that too now. Everything has to slow or CC and gap close.
Yeah, and everything has to have sustain.
Or you're
and-
trash.
And you always have the on 3 hit shit too.
Yeah,
That's
the
in
3-hit passive that, oh man.
Oh my
What's
god.
really
is
weird-
doing
All
that?
3.
Yeah, Kane has
Yeah,
a 3-hit
they
passive.
actually
I
have
think.
4 hit passive on Kai'Sa.
Percentage health bonus damage.
Oh yeah, that was it. It was,
Yeah, the US champion has it.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a
4 hit
couple that
passive.
aren't 3.
It's
They'll probably
a
get
3-hit
10
passive, % health damage that slows, by the way.
Yeah,
And
that's
heals me.
slow, too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gives your, oh, if it doesn't
And if
give
you
you
just got hit with that
it's
3-hit passive slow, and you do it again, hit with it again, it's stunned. So there you go. That's everything in one ability. Holy shit, that's crazy.
There
Tom
you
Cruise
go.
just
Hire me.
think for that. Because you have a support that does like 30% maximum health damage on a 3-hit ability. An integral part of that is an easy to land skill shot that also slows you.
Sometimes.
Tom,
Oh, Tony!
they were like, "Hey, how do we make something that's like Thresh but even more ridiculous?" I know, Tom Kent.
Yeah.
Thresh was
They-
like crazy too, but he
Well
morphed
played,
so
Thresh
many
game.
matchups. When
In
Thresh came
solo
out, he was
queue, it
so
was such
fucking
a nightmare.
powerful. But
Since
then
they had a lot
He was,
of like really fucking overloaded champions when one champion could basically be made into 3 different ones if you wanted to.
yeah,
have
one champion's
different
ability could
skill
be
sets.
enough. Well, I mean, the thing is that most of their abilities don't even promote like skill. Like the combos are so obvious. It's just like basically in the
Yeah.
tooltip. It's the same thing as building siege tanks in StarCraft. It's like the
Forced
tooltip just
synergy.
says, by the way, use this ability first, and then combo it with your second ability, and then combo it with your
Yeah,
third
it
ability,
literally
and then ult
they
beforehand
do
and do
that.
the whole thing over again. By the way, like why do you even
yeah,
bother?
they literally put a tooltip. It's like this ability works best when comboed with E ability. Like, all right, thanks for the help, guys.
Blizzard's a really big fan of forced synergy. You'll notice that obviously in MMOs because they're all like rotation based, but it is really like Blizzard really hammered that in Blizzard Dota. There's so much forced synergy and the talent system. Like you may not like
Yeah.
immediately see it if you look at the abilities normally, but all the talent systems basically pigeonhole you into a rotation, which
No,
means
it's also
that
pretty apparent if you look at the abilities themselves. Like a lot of the champions have the problem, the characters have the problem where you have like one main ability and then the other two are basically only to synergize with it.
Yeah.
Like Nova, I
Yeah.
think.
Like any ADC champion,
Yeah.
they've been
Well.
doing that for a while now.
I just don't understand. So this is something I was just thinking about is Counter-Strike is a game where you like the entire idea of the game is that you are an integral piece of your team when you're playing like the intended diffuse map 5v5, and you're also not only are you an integral part of your team, but you have an opportunity to change the game if you are skilled enough. So all you have to do is be good enough, and you can win. And the only snowballing effect that there is if you, through lack of knowledge and game knowledge and skill, spend too much money in a disadvantaged position and put yourself in a hole. Then there's like some snowball effect with the fact that you have
Money.
you have a lack of money, but you have max loss bonus after 4 rounds, I think it is, where if you lose 4 rounds, you get the max loss bonus, and every single round from that point onward, you get the same large amount of money, because the whole idea is that by doing this, by giving the players this huge comeback mechanic, there's more of an it sort of handholds the casual players, but it's really important for strategy, is the way that it's developed. So you have this element where you can decide, what I want to do is I want to play an aggressive play style with a submachine gun or something, and grab I know that this player is playing with a sniper rifle in this particular part of the map. So I'm going to try and come at him from a different angle. Like automatically, there's so much more involved with like just approaching this problem where this sniper guy killed me last round, or last 3 rounds he's killed some of my teammate from this angle. So I know he likes to play this position. So you're like learning as the game goes on, and you're adapting to that. And
Plus, that all that's exemplified by how well you work with your team.
Right.
Too.
So you could have to communicate this information between players. You got to let them know, hey, I'm going to grab this. Like good players communicate and do well and aim well and all that shit. So like just the idea that on top of it, the time to kill is really low. So if you catch somebody out, you can generally kill them really quickly without them being able to turn around and kill you, unless you're bad and you miss all your shots. Then there's also the whole idea that the rounds themselves are so short that even if one team is at a huge advantage because of money, eventually, within maybe 3 or 4 minutes, that will reset because of the max loss bonus. So rounds rarely take a whole minute to play. Like sometimes they do, but rarely does that happen in most games that I've played. So the whole idea of Counter-Strike being, in my opinion, a far superior game in terms of enjoyment to League is that the games take individual shorter pockets of time to play key rounds in them. If you're good enough, you can always impact the game positively and always get an advantage. And if you're not good enough, if you die, it's usually because you failed to account for, like, it's very rarely do you get what's called like CS GOAT, where you feel like the game fucked you in some way. It's very rare that happens. Almost always.
Unless you're dealing with a hacker. Or something.
Yeah. So like in the average game where everybody's not hacking and they're all relatively even skill, you always have
dealing with a smurf.
Yeah.
Like it's straightforward. You don't have any fucking bullshit that'll railroad you. Like there's none of that. And
and strategy is still really fucking good.
You're allowed to be competitive in that game. You're allowed to shit talk the other team. You're allowed to do say whatever you want to any of these guys, and you won't get punished for it. So it makes it just an overall more fun experience. Like,
You guys know that in Blizzard Dota there is no ult chat, right?
I forgot about that.
You can
And
disable the
allied
team
chat is off by default.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course it is. I'm sure if you actually use it, you'll get fucking
You will. You will
chat
get
banned or something.
muted. You get chat banned. It's all completely automated. There's a lot of talk about that on Team Liquid. That it's just basically if you get enough reports, it's just auto bans you.
Sounds like League.
Pretty much.
That's so insane to me.
Because I know a guy in League, and he was like, he was a shit talking king. Like he would just go off on everybody. He would tell them they drive like a picked up or a lifted pickup, and like talk about their moms and shit. Like everything you can imagine. I have tons of screenshots of it. It took him like 3 years to get chat banned for 1 day.
Yeah,
I
but
was astonished it took so long. And
Well,
other people just get banned for like nothing.
well, in
Yeah.
the modern day, that wouldn't fly probably. Like that was
No, not at all. I used to tell people to stick their heads in the microwave and stuff in League. It took quite a while to get banned. That was
Listen, your username was literally your dad's dick, so I don't even know how you got. That's an anomaly in and
That's
of
what
itself.
got me perma banned.
I'm pretty sure that it actually takes longer for people to get the ban if they spend money on the game.
Oh, probably.
Isn't there like
I wouldn't be
there's
surprised.
just like didn't you say Darian or Bro Nogo? Didn't you say there's some guy who got banned who just for pinging, like you get banned for pinging?
Oh, you can get yeah. That is now. I think that's a report category, but if not, you can just say like bad manner or whatever, and then explain. What? I just got an item called Beat Stick.
Yeah, if you like beating your stick, because now you got a beat stick.
I got
to
it
beat
from
your
a
stick
cougar.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Needly.
Oh yeah. I guess it's topical. But yeah, no, you can get banned for excessive pinging. But you can also like that's so dumb because they only started banning people for that after they added they added a function to mute pings. Why would you ban people for something that can be muted? It's so ridiculous. Like, people will automatically start losing more games if everybody starts muting them. Like, it's just going to happen because you have to communicate with your team in order to win games most of the time, especially in higher elos. You can't just, I mean, unless you're really, really good at the game, then you could just, I guess, mouth off and everybody can mute you and you could be like Hashinshin stuck in fucking Diamond 1 forever and complain about how bad the game is. And whatever. Like, you can do that if you want to, if you're really that good or if you're really that retarded. You can do whatever the hell you want. And I don't understand why it gets to this point where you have this situation where, oh, we are going to add functionalities for you to mute other players' pings. We're also going to start banning people who abuse the ping system. Like, you're having like two solutions, one of which works way better and will weed it out over time, and the other of which will just make more people annoyed and toxic.
Yeah, you're just
Quote, unquote.
halting people's efforts. You're just putting a fucking brick wall right in front of them.
It's like you just extended your nose with a nose job and then cut it off to spite your face afterwards. Like, it's so ridiculous.
Like, what the fuck?
I don't know. There's a lot of things wrong with Riot as a company, but the way that they're so afraid of challenging their players, not only in gameplay, but also in social situations. Like, if there's one thing that I've learned by playing League, it has definitely made me, like, I have to actively force myself to not be a shitty human being now. And I didn't used to have to do that. Like, I'm not going to blame...
The fact that you're already fucking brainwashed by them.
No. I'm just saying the game...
You're a shitty human being.
You gotta break the conditioning, man.
No, listen. There's, like, an element of it where I can... I understand why some people are upset about that, but the fact that they're reinforcing the whole idea that people, say things that get other people upset, and they're trying to like clean up the internet and make it a better place. Like, the fact that they're even trying to do that and they're putting effort into doing that is so ridiculous to me. Like, I understand that you have a situation where the intended result of having communication is always going to be abused. Like, the fact that you have communication in the game, some people will use it in an abusive manner or be quote-unquote toxic. But it's just so
funny.
It's so ridiculous. Like, if people are really going to be that offended by it, they should just mute. And that's what Riot should be telling people.
That's what the fucking mute feature's for.
Yeah.
Like, why have it if you're just gonna ban people regardless? Like, what's the point? You have a fucking mute button for a reason. You have a mute ping option for a reason. They added a specific feature when it went too far with the pings. There's a specific mute ping option. You know what I mean? Like, why? What's the point?
I don't know, man.
By the way, Blizzard does this too. They do it with Overwatch. People are getting banned.
Overwatch bans people if they say something that they don't like on some other unrelated media.
It doesn't even matter. You could.
Oh yeah, well, try hard.
It's very
a certain
Reddit.
dance in the game, and you'll get banned if you do it too much. Like that's how far they go.
You had like one guy who talks in like an unrelated stream, and then everybody on Reddit's like, "Oh my god, that offends me! Quick, everybody spam his investors, get him to pull their support."
What a ridiculous
Gotta appeal
game.
to the streamers, dude.
Maybe.
Gotta make sure the streamers have the best experience possible. Same thing with that PUBG game and Fortnite.
God.
That game,
PUBG, you get banned. If they say you're ghosting them, they just ban you.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Where streamers are a protected class of player.
Regardless of the situation, you get banned. Like even if it's like a beneficial thing to your team, you get banned. Killing your teammate doesn't matter. Like there's a reason you can kill your teammate in that game. It doesn't matter. They will ban you for killing them anyway. Like why even have the option to have friendly fire? Like what the fuck is the point?
Well.
No, the ban for positioning for them.
I watched some PUBG stream. That game. That game is a real piece of work.
You don't say.
I can't really figure out why people enjoy it, but I haven't been able to figure out why a lot of people enjoy a lot of things. That's sort of what this podcast is all about in some cases, you know? It's really just trying to tap into the collective consciousness and understand what the casual player is really into. That's why we had this whole episode on challenge. We talked to a lot of that stuff. We didn't really make any succinct, salient points in any individual case, but we talked about a lot of shit, you know?
There's some thesis somewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, I guess, let's try and find it. Let's try and find it.
Let's see. You guys are talking about RTSs and what you wanted to see in RTSs. And basically what everybody said is they want to play an RTS. Like that's ultimately what it drums down to.
Yeah.
You sit down to play an RTS, you want to play an RTS. And you know, it makes you look back to like StarCraft 2, you're not playing an RTS. StarCraft 1, you're not really playing an RTS. Armies of Exego, kind of better in some regards, definitely still not really playing an RTS. Because, you know, it's still just stuff waypointing. So that's what the competitive aspect is. You know, you get in with another human player and you're playing a game, you're actually trying to like outthink each other and, you know, control the map and stuff like that. Single player doesn't have that. The capacity for it is there, but developers opt out of it because they're probably really shitty players themselves.
Yeah.
So... and they're lazy, basically, is what it amounts to. So when I went to StarCraft 2 and wanted to make a campaign, I was like, okay, so I want to play an RTS. Like, I want to make something I want to play because nobody else wants to make an RTS campaign. They would rather make something that's like a 10 APM, click around a map with your hero and waste 2 hours auto-attacking shit.
Yep.
That's not interesting. People do this because they get into the hole where it's like, oh, we made an RTS game, but now we got to make a single-player experience, otherwise we won't get sales. But we don't want to make a single-player experience because it's too much effort. So let's make this about a hero. We're going to call him like Ted Turner or Todd or something, and Todd's going to walk around the map and he's going to auto-attack stuff and eat pizza all day.
Todd! You made it into the game!
And then players make campaigns like that because I don't fucking know. They like the taste of Windows. They don't like playing RTSs, but they don't have.
Well, I think part of it is definitely the fact that so a lot of people look at these developers for like thinking that they make solid experiences. Some people really do lick the window too hard and like they break the window with their tongue, but and say like, oh fuck, these developers can do no wrong. Literally cannot be lazy, by the way. So whatever, those people are probably not. You can't really change their mind, most likely. They're already too far down the goatsy hole. But
they want to play an RPG without actually playing an RPG because RPGs are too hard. Numbers and stuff are difficult. So let's play something that pretends to be an RPG.
I personally can't stand those simulation games. Haha, by the way, simulation. And I can't stand those games where you actually have to micromanage every aspect of the game. Like, what's one example of those? Probably that Scam Citizen game, despite the fact that it's called Scam Citizen.
Well, I mean, even
or like EVE Online or something. Like I can't. I personally. I
Dark Souls.
Oh, really?
Like just like inventory management or leveling up or whatever. Like people, it's too difficult for most people these days. So that's why they say Dark Souls is a hard game. But the reason why I prefer to play a game like say Dark Souls or even God of War or DMC or whatever over the average. Like shooters or other sort of like single player experiences is because of, there is times where you are actually playing the game's mechanics and stuff. And RTS campaigns haven't given me that yet. Like I haven't like the closest I've really gotten is Armies of Mexico because it actually like forced me to improve my abilities as a player. But games like StarCraft 2 and stuff, it's like it's all gimmicks and bullshit. You're not playing an RTS, you're just playing a gimmick. And like you're talking about like the siege tanks, like, oh, this is a mission where you unlock siege tanks, now siege tanks best everything. Like it's just gimmick bullshit just to waste your time and fill the budget that says, hey, you know, we need this many missions to say that we're releasing a full campaign with this product and the marketers.
Yeah, a lot of it feels really fillery, especially those fucking what is that Redstone mission where you talk to Heyman?
Yeah. I think the best mission that I played in StarCraft 2, having not played Legacy of the Void and never will, is the air platform mission at the ends of, and I think it was the second last mission, one of the optional missions in Wings of Liberty.
Yeah.
Where there's like the 3 Zerg bases and the Leviathan and stuff, and you're basically just sat there. There's like resources and stuff. Although it isn't really an RTS mission because the Zerg bases aren't like expanding or anything. But it's the first mission and the last mission in all of StarCraft 2 where it says, hey, here's a map where you get to play a macro. Here's a map where you get to expand and build units and actually like do stuff. And the only gimmick that shows up is just a boss unit.
You're basically it's basically a time battling gimmick, but it's that lately you have everything unlocked. You can do whatever you want, but you're still like the whole gimmick is still your battling time. But it doesn't really matter because you have everything at your disposal.
Yeah, you have like a ton of time. So what I did is I just like mind controlled every Zerg base. And I just had like an army of my own Zerg, and the Leviathan shows up and like instantly dies. But you know, it's like the first mission where I actually get to like play the game, as opposed to like the arbitrary time limits, the arbitrary, you know, do this or that, or you know, put things here, control this, fetch 3 raptor heads, all this other dumbass shit. So obviously, you know, when I was making a campaign, or at least when I wanted to make a campaign before the performance issues really forced me out of it, is like the first thing I say is I want to make an experience that is just you playing StarCraft. And of course, I want it to be challenging. And since I was playing at like a high diamond level, I wanted the tutorial to be at that level. And I wanted to design each mission to force me as a developer to improve. So I wanted to set the very foundation to be very high skill level right off the bat, which of course means that, you know, if I ever had released that, there probably wouldn't be really many people who would even get past the tutorial, which I was quite content with because I really just despise these games that basically you fail doing something, but the game lets you succeed anyways. Like the game just basically makes things easier for you because there is no thought going on because you are just doing as Simon says. And so in the first mission, you know, the very first mission is one of the only times that I use basically like a scripted event, which is I use bullies to control where the AI builds, and I have them bunker rush you. And the whole idea is if you float above 200 minerals, you die. Like you cannot float minerals in this at all, ever, at any point. And then the other thing I wanted to do as well is because a lot of these RTS campaigns never have like team games or like free-for-alls or stuff like that, with the exception of Red Alert 3 from what I've seen.
Oh, don't say that.
I can't speak of the quality of it, but the concept is there.
No, don't say it.
Very much unlike all the other games I had played. Like, take, for example, I think it was the last mission in Heat of the Swarm. When
you have Rainer's ship as
and Rainer literally does fucking nothing. He patrols units into one area.
He only exists. Yeah, he only exists there to be a.
He's just something you have to.
He's a liability. Yeah, you just have to defend it. Like it's no different than if you just started with an extra expansion or something, and then that expansion was attacked.
A little bit better in Legacy of the Void when allies usually have like ridiculous armies after a while.
Well, they also they literally just completely mismanage their heroes in Legacy of the Void. Artanis has no tactical AI, and he just charges in and kills himself all the time.
Yeah.
And then you're expected to believe that he stayed alive anyways for some reason. Like I don't really get it.
Tactical AI was the big thing I wanted to do as well. I talked about that before, obviously not on the podcast or anything, but
yeah.
We had a prototype AI for the infestors, and everything was like, it was a total conversion. It wasn't just I'm taking StarCraft and making it hard. Everything has changed completely from the ground up, but there is still Zerg. All their units and stuff are different, but there's still like some similarities. And there was infestors that are now interior. No, they're not interior decorators. There was something else. Interior decorators were vipers. They could gank your buildings now. They were amazing. So the infestors, like the basic things is they could spawn infested Terrans underground. and the AIDS was now a projectile, so you could avoid it. It wasn't just like an instant. Oh, you're
Yeah, that's what
CC
Blizzard
damage
did with it,
XP.
by the way.
Like there's very few active abilities in that, but any AI unit that had active abilities, it microed. So when they used their abilities and drained their mana, they would move back so that other units could move forward. So very simple stuff, like super simple stuff that a player would do. Now it's possible within like Brood War with Brood War API or StarCraft 2 to make an AI that basically performs everything perfectly. To have like pixel perfect marine movement, to basically perform at a machine precision. But that wasn't really my intent to do. My intent was just to make things behave in a way that it expected. So you're going to have some areas that like try to cut you. You have casters that move back once they've casted a spell so they don't get killed. And, you know, other sorts of stuff like that. All this was integrated into a melee AI interface that functioned at the campaign level. So you had the campaign triggers, and each map would have maybe like 10, 20 triggers, tops. That's it. It was basically literally a melee game. There was no cutscenes in the middle of the map ever at any point. That was basically like something I said straight off the bat. We will never.
Yeah, you don't
want to
take control away from the player. You don't
too
want
many of these
center
games,
view and pause and all this other shit.
Too many of these fucking games are constantly ganking your camera away. It is annoying as fuck and completely yanks you right out of any immersion. So it was literally a melee game. And you were actually playing an RTS. You know, the AI expanded, it defended. We rewrote the way they handle attack waves, so it functioned more like a campaign. All that was entirely controllable through triggers, through variables. And you could still take advantage of triggers where if you wanted the AI to build a base in a way that you wanted, you can use bullies for that. You didn't have to spawn them with that. So a lot of the maps were basically you and the enemy start off with the exact same thing. You know, your 4 workers, your command center or whatever. And then they build up and you build up. So everything was timed based on the actual game timings. You don't have to have any arbitrary wait 6 minutes for like 2 Zerglings to show up in your base. I hear a puppy.
Is that yours, Dick Sack?
It might be my neighbor's. Sorry. Hold on.
I think your farmers are getting hungry.
Yeah, they are. I'll go get rid of it one sec.
It's like the entire concept is just so that, you know, you start up an RTS campaign, you're here to play an RTS. So I looked at Brood War professional play, and I looked at more casual games that we played in Ricky's Warlords and Merchants maps, you know, long games. What made those enjoyable? What made those challenging? And, you know, when you play like a 2-hour, 3-hour mission and you sustain like 150 APM, there's obviously a lot going on. And a lot of that comes down to macro. And you look at StarCraft 2, and it's like, it's a rarity to have a 2-base map. Usually when you uncover an expansion, if you uncover an expansion, you've already like depleted a lot of your main base resources. There's some exceptions, for example, maps that put like 3 fucking Vespene geysers in your main base for some reason. And like the maps are all super small. So I just wanted to like capture both the intensity of a professional game where an opponent like doesn't necessarily adapt to everything you do. Like I didn't want an AI that always says, hey, you built Battlecruiser, so I'm gonna build Scourge. Because that's boring. You know, that's not really interesting if you just like get immediately reach around it for trying to do something you wanted to do. And I mean, I designed units in a different way anyway, so it wasn't like super hard counters like that. But it was like the AI would like, as the game went on, it would switch from being, you know, potentially like really aggressive early on to being more expansion and macro oriented. It would start thinking about like making bigger, you know, longer attacks or whatever, and like start fortifying its bases and stuff like that. So this is like, all this is really simple. It's like super basic stuff, but you don't see it in single player experiences because people, for example, in StarCraft 2's community, a lot of people didn't even realize you could put custom melee AI in a dependency. There had to have been at least 5 people who said, hey, you can't do that. And I already had a working example for it. And I just like would look and be like, are you fucking serious? Like, where does this misinformation comes from that you can't do this? Because it's no different than any other replacing a base asset in the game. I'm replacing the framework for the melee AI. I'm replacing all the Galaxy scripts. It's all done in Galaxy except for some of the triggers. And nobody, like the fact that that kind of misinformation existed, the fact that pretty much everybody said that the AI is entirely like a black box. Nobody understands how it works. I mean, a lot of it's
I also think
a lot of
point of that is probably that not very many people wanted to understand it.
Yeah, well, a lot that's the thing, dude. There wasn't really a lot of drive to make an actual RTS, to make an actual campaign. So as far as I'm concerned, every campaign that's come out of StarCraft 2 is a failure because it's not an RTS.
Look how hard it is to make anything with that game too. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, obviously the data editor and stuff like that, but but this is the thing. The AI, because Jademus Sreg, who was going to make the AI framework initially, he stalled for like 3 fucking years or 4 years. It did nothing. And then HKS is like, what was it you needed done? And I was like, I need the AI to not be stupid. And 2 weeks, we had a functional AI. And he didn't know fuck all about Galaxy before he started. The only problem with it is the performance is horrendous when stuff is fighting because Blizzard doesn't know what anything is in terms of compiling their middleware correctly. And probably because it's running a lot of stuff through Galaxy, which is like using molasses to grease up your dick before stuffing it into a bucket of iron shavings.
Yeah, it's horribly slow. Performance, both sides of it, like when you're making and when you're actually playing the game, are shit. Either way.
A lot of the people who like make campaigns or whatever, they like swear by the game. Like you have a polarity. You have like the 99% of the thinking population. They're like, this game is atrocious. I don't want anything to do with this. And then you have the other side, which are like masochists and exhibitionists. They enjoy pain. They enjoy the exhibition of their pain. So they make projects in this game, but then they don't actually want to like actually really get into it. Like there's people who like they go through, however long making a campaign, like a year plus, very easily for that game. And they put in a lot of time and a lot of effort, but they're too scared to get into things that are actually not really that difficult, like fixing the graphics, voice acting, stuff like that, all of which is like really, really comparatively simple to get into. Voice acting may be something that takes a long time to actually get good at, but, getting as good as Blizzard, you could do that in just a couple weeks. Easy.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's just, there's so many resources available, too. So this is where we get into the topic of discussing challenge as it pertains to content creation, which I think is an interesting topic. But I don't know.
There's 2 arms to that. There's 2 arms to it. There is user experience. So StarCraft 2, all of its like limitations and other issues aside, the big thing that stands between you making content in StarCraft 2 is user experience, which it's easy to say it's like the editor and how slow it is and the layout and stuff like that. But it's a lot of other things too. Like it's how the pipeline works. Like let's take, for example, a particle system or a model. If I'm making an asset inside 3ds Max, I have to preview it inside StarCraft 2's editor to see any changes that I've made within StarCraft 2. This is a massive difference between even Sins of a Solar Empire, where their particle editor shows you a preview. Or say, for example, Unreal, all that stuff's built inside the game. So you have extra steps. And even though those extra steps are really fast, it's still extra steps. It's still an extra barrier between you and delivering the content to yourself and iterating. So naturally, that means that every step you add, it adds time between you and the process of seeing feedback for your work.
It's also an extra step external to whatever program you're using too. Like you have to go through completely different mediums to implement that step too. So it's way more obtrusive than anything else. Like it's just way too obtuse and hard to get around when you have to go through all these other programs and preview shit.
In some cases, it's kind of expected. Like you don't expect StarCraft 2 to ship with a model editor because like there's better tools for that, and like it takes forever to do that. But for some things, it's utterly absurd. Like, say for example, in StarCraft 2, like you've got the campaign. So the campaign will have dependencies, one that contains the data, one that contains the assets, or whatever like that, because it's easier to manage your file sizes that way. And let's say you are working on a map, and you say, okay, so these units are unbalanced. I want to update these units. You have to close the map, go into the dependency, make your changes, close the dependency, go back into the map. And that process can take you up to 10 minutes. Like
at least. It's
insane.
That's
and
if
you will enter these loopholes. If you have anything open in the editor, like you try to start taking shortcuts so it's faster, you're going to enter a loophole where you can't save your dependency and you can't save your map because the other is open. Which means you actually have to force yourself to lose information. You have to make a decision what information you're going to lose so that you can save one of the files.
Or even potentially like corrupt one's information or something.
Yep.
Like it.
Yeah, I've had that.
Of course, like it's just you have too many systems that you have to implement the shit into to make it reliable in any way.
And then you have to contend with Blizzard too, because you never know when they're going to publish a patch that's just going to silently delete everything.
Yeah, delete. By the way, delete all your preferences that you had set before to make it faster too.
Yep.
So you have to go and reset everything. It's just a reset button with any patch they have.
Well,
Like,
I've been
1.5 patch, and I think 2.0 was that void.
Void.
Unceremoniously delete everything in the files that the editor and everything defaults to for your
that
project.
is inexcusable to me.
So they're not compatible anymore.
No, they're compatible. They just deleted them. It's like because
No, they actually deleted local files. Like this is
yeah,
actually
they
insane.
delete files of the
No
game,
way.
not the game's files.
That's
So-
insane.
They do a full wipe of their entire directory. There's no declaration for this, even though
That's
this is the files
psychotic.
that you need the files for the editor to
Yeah.
open them in there.
That
You
is
need your mod files and stuff in there because the editor doesn't like look in any other folder. So, lo and behold, you update, which is going to be an automatic process if you're running the launcher, and bam,
Which
your
you're
pizza
pretty-
is rancid.
Yeah, you're pretty much forced to run the launcher now too. Like with all of
Yeah.
their modern games, anything that's come out in the last 5 years, you have to run the launcher for anything.
And that launcher is the worst program piece of software I have ever used, except for maybe StarCraft or CV5. It is
Yeah.
so fucking slow.
They're impeding you on all fronts.
It's
Not
like
only that,
incredible how
that's
slow that
crap
program is.
itself. As I know at least like 3 people who had the launcher like fuck itself over so much they have to reinstall it completely before using it again.
And then you have Blizzard Agent. I've closed the fucking launcher for a day. Blizzard Agent is just chilling out in the background using 300 megabytes of RAM. Like, what are you doing with this memory?
Yeah,
Mining
how does this
Bitcoin
happen?
forever.
Possible? What is going on back there? Is it
I have
mining
used so
Bitcoin
many
or
launchers
something?
for so many games. Like, I download Chinese and Korean MMOs and stuff from Russia, and they all have their own launcher to update and install. It's all in dog speak. I don't understand any of it, but you know what? It does its job, and it does it relatively well. Some of them are pretty resource heavy. None of them are like fucking Blizzard's launchers that like use uncapped bandwidth and destroy your internet to basically mine bitcoins. Or,
Yeah.
That's
That's not wrong.
all of Google's cloud operating systems on your computer. And it's common for the launcher to take up to a minute for a window to load.
Consistently, too. Like it could take a minute at the best of times. Sometimes it takes more. Like
Yeah,
that.
sometimes it doesn't load. And then they embed YouTube onto it, so there's the
Oh
security, right?
man, yeah,
And,
you gotta
you know,
watch their
inefficient as
trailers.
And then
You know-
those are always like auto loading and everything. And then half the time they don't load for me. It says, "Oh, we couldn't find this. We'll find
Yeah,
it. Check
could
back
not
later."
find
Like the
That's funny. That is literally happened where it's like cannot find video not found
Yeah.
in their launcher. Like,
they try to
what?
embed YouTube and it just times out because YouTube is such an outstanding service. And then you
Well,
get an
they already-
error that doesn't give you any actual useful information like that. It doesn't say like timed out. It just says, "Hey, we couldn't find this." It's like,
No, could
what the
not
fuck do you mean you
find-
couldn't find it? How's that an error message? It's like when
Yeah,
an Apple
sorry.
computer crashes, it just gives you a smiley face.
Yeah, that is true. That really happens with Windows 10. That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Well, I think Windows 10
It's
still
Windows
gives
10,
you an error ID. Apple, on the other hand, it's like it just works. So why would it give you an error? There was no, error.
You don't
It's
need.
just
You don't need. You don't need the name of the error. What the error name
My
is.
computer had a
Yeah.
sad. That was it. My computer just had that time. It's like the progressive programming language where it's just like maybe it decides it wants to do this or not. You can't force it to do it. So maybe you can't like force the computer to work. That would be oppressive. So that very much seems to be like how Blizzard's launcher works. It's like I'm gonna sit here, I'm gonna use your resources, and I might work, I might not work.
You have
never
to know
know.
that they reused a lot of their tech from the launcher in StarCraft Remastered, where basically every like tab in the game is a Chrome tab, and the options open up for 30 minutes.
I would believe it absolutely.
And then after you close the game, it still tries to upload like 2 megabytes of
Yeah,
random
yeah.
data to cloud.
fucking-
for no
that is
The fact,
so-
the fact that you have to upload data to begin with to play
It is
any
so
of these
absurd.
games.
Like you test a map from your editor in a game you've had downloaded forever, and it's like I'm
Uploading
gonna stream data,
Yeah.
100 megabytes.
Yeah, uploading data, like
Like
why-
I understand you guys want my furry collection, but do you have to pipe it through a 56K connection?
They do that all the time. The more you update your app too, like the more they'll try to force you to use their Blizzard launcher with your games. Like if you try to open it after like a certain point, like it'll just open the launcher. You can't open the game itself half the time.
You can
have
open
to
the
go
game
with
if you
it.
like use launch parameters, but they don't publicize them anywhere, so the only way to know is by word of mouth, pretty much.
Do you like how it's called Blizzard Battle.net app? That's the actual name of the program. Blizzard Battle.net app.
Well, it was just Battle.net for some time, and then it was just called Blizzard app for
Yeah,
some time.
they wanted to get rid of Battle.net. And, like some marketer had an aneurysm and suddenly thought, let's throw away 20 years of building up this logo for
Yeah.
reasons.
throw
And
that-
then another marketer was like, you're fucking dumb.
Yeah,
And
what
Blizzard
name
was
is
like,
more
"Yeah, but we've already
recognizable?
called it the Blizzard app. So now we have to call it the Blizzard Battle.net app. And then
Yep.
someone might ask, why do we call it an app? Like, but where does that fit in? But then it's trendy because people call things apps. So we gotta call it an app
Yeah,
because
that's
it's
part-
trendy.
We're
We're
the
yeah,
millennials.
Everything
gotta-
on
we gotta
beyond
identify
Windows
with
8
those
is an app, dude. Everything on Mac is an app, dude. So
it's an app. Like it's a program, so it's gotta be an app.
yeah, app. Dude, that's what everything is on beyond Windows 8, and anything on a Mac is an app now.
Yep.
So it's like the trendy thing to do.
Like app used to be like a terminology. It used to be short for application.
Yeah.
You used to call things app just shorthand. But then somewhere along, someone realized they can make this trendy. They can turn their Trilby and they can make it trendy. And I'm not really sure where it originated from, but now everything is just called app. And it is like condescending in many ways.
So we've
'Cause
covered
everybody has an iPhone now.
we've covered the idea that it's really obnoxious to just even play the games, let alone
That's
Makes
one thing
content
I like to
in
go
it.
back
This
to.
is gonna be a hard one to wrap up.
yeah. Well, I'm
There's
not trying to
one
wrap
thing
it
I
up. We're
like-
only 2 hours in, anyways. So we got time.
I only like licking windows if the film on them is like well matured. Like there's like a lot of sweat on it. Like no fresh windows, just you know, like the ones in
Sweatshop
the East
windows?
Indian household I went to a couple weeks ago, where like their stove had never been cleaned in like 30 years. It looked like at any point it would just be an incredible fire hazard, and half the tile was shattered and shit like that. And there was like a pothole in the middle of the kitchen. But the windows looked like that somebody had not licked them for 30 years. And the first thing I thought is, I wonder what that tastes like. Am I a Blizzard fanboy now? Is this
Absolutely.
Is this what it's like?
Yeah.
It's like a
You hit it.
spiritual journey.
Yeah. Might as well
That's
do
what-
ayahuasca now.
There's one thing is that I'd like to go back to it, and that is, Mesk basically said that his like ideal, I guess, RTS campaign would be a campaign where you just play the base game without any fancy additions. And I'm pretty sure if I saw a campaign like that, I'd think that it's incredibly lazy. And in fact, I think there
Yeah,
was
you
a
might-
campaign like that.
Yeah, like
And
you might think that
yeah.
because you might think, hey, this guy just made a campaign and it's just a game. Like you
Yeah.
But
I
that's the
also
thing
don't
is-
think that it's like necessarily bad to enjoy like puzzles presented by like perhaps normal campaign maps where you have
I
like,
think that's
big
something that
enemies.
holds a lot of people back actually from making that because they think they might be perceived that way. And on one hand, I can definitely sympathize with that because, you know, when you look at a lot of like macro-based maps and campaigns and stuff for like StarCraft 1 or even StarCraft 2, they don't have anything in them because they're not really like using AI. Their intent is not to make it like really challenging. It usually amounts to just like an hour to 2 hour slog. So this like especially I was with StarCraft 1 since like 1998, watching the campaign communities and stuff grow up. And there was like initially a lot of build and destroy campaigns that I believe Pornogo has played a couple of those. And
But they
didn't
say
have
that
very favorable
people who worked
feedback
on
for it.
StarCraft 1 campaigns are completely fucking retarded for the most part. I have no idea how to use anything in the game.
Yeah.
Contains.
Precisely.
They
So
have no idea to use the AI ships. They can't write anything of their own. They can design maps. They can design objectives. Usually they fuck up their triggers. They usually can't do anything, so you can't expect like a good experience out of them.
yeah,
But
so
I would argue that it actually is possible to create a puzzle-esque map which requires you to play the game,
Well,
which requires to expand, and
Yeah.
which requires
It's
you to
more
pay
than
for yourself.
possible.
It's surely possible, but this is the thing. Like, you got all the bad examples that have set the precedence of what people expect, and then you get the feedback that amounts to like, build and destroy is boring. I don't like this anymore. Let's do something different with the
Yeah.
campaign.
The-
So then the
the
communal
bar is set so
trend,
low.
the meta, so to speak, leads to people diverging away from that. So nobody like researches or pursues how to actually make a good build destroy experience. So then you ended up with campaigns like Vile Aggression and all the other stuff where they basically are just all like RPG-esque.
Yeah, I really don't. So you've
Yeah,
actually been
I
around
thought
during the
so.
development of Vile Aggression, right? You were like talking
Yeah.
with Laconia. So can you speak to his intended, like what his design philosophy was? Was it really just because he couldn't
was a
design
poet.
Build and Destroy, or he couldn't play Build and Destroy, so he didn't find it engaging, or something like that? Like, what was
I honestly don't know, but I do remember telling him, RPG maps are boring. Why not make a build and destroy? And then he was always so resistant to this. Like, this is the thing. You've got the mindset that build and destroy is boring because the vast majority of people who play are bad. Because if people are really into build and destroy, they're probably playing an iCup. They're probably like pursuing Letter. They're like watching professional play. A lot of these people are not even exposed to the fact that there's custom content to begin with. It's not really like
Yeah, that's why when I posted in Consummate on Team Liquid and it actually had Build and Destroy games, everybody was like, "Oh, this is really cool." It's like if the campaign were actually required some skill to complete. And it's like I was shocked that people didn't even know. I mean, I wasn't really
people
shocked
don't
at the
know.
end of the day.
There's a
but-
big divide between that, and it could be because of, like Nekron was saying, that the original campaigns just weren't really that good or engaging or whatever.
Right, so
So-
everybody grew out of them very, very quickly.
And then the people who were developing the content saw that trend, and then they didn't want to make Build and Destroy anymore. So, when I say, hey, I want to make an RTS campaign in StarCraft 2, that's not like really out there. That's like, I want to make an RTS. But the thing is that in order to actually do that, you actually have to have like more understanding of how the game works and how to make content in that game than any other project to this date has even attempted. Like, I was technical artist and recruiter and trainer and stuff like that in StarCrafts, and StarCrafts had the most advanced graphic stuff that has ever been done in that game, just because of the concepts that we had to imply in that. And that doesn't even like as a project though, it's incredibly simple. You're just changing some graphics around, and a little bit of data was changed to accommodate that, and that's basically it. Like, it's super simple. It doesn't take you that long to get into it once you understand the concepts. But to actually make a good build and destroy campaign in that game, you have to change basically everything in the game. Period. Like, it effectively amounts to a total conversion in terms of the data, because first you have to make the game not stupid, and then you have to make an AI framework that'll actually function for that game. But it's all about the end experience. Like, vast majority of people who originally wanted to play an RTS wanted to play an RTS, and then by extent of being exposed to like the original Broodwar campaigns and the trends to follow, they either diverged away from that, or they were never exposed to it to begin with, and then they just played competitive multiplayer stuff. What I wanted to do was build a bridge between what is the quintessential multiplayer experience, not just in terms of a 1v1 competitive experience, but also like team play and stuff like that. Put that in a single player experience where you could still be challenged as if you were playing a high-level multiplayer game. It's really simple. You're not really trying to catch anything about that. Like, obviously I have like a custom story, and maybe like there'll be bosses and some other stuff that like show up in there, but the entire intent is just to keep it simple, just to focus on that one experience, because really what I just wanted was just a one experience. If I'm walking into StarCraft, I want to play StarCraft. I don't want to play.
Yeah, you don't want to play Cutscene Quest.
I don't want to play Todd
Annihilation
Quest for the Holy Pizza. If I want to play the Holy Pizza Pursuit, I'm gonna like go into like frigging McDonald's or something and start like screaming and puking on their tables. So
You actually wanted to play the game itself.
yeah, so obviously I can definitely sympathize that people are going to see that as lazy, because that's the mindset they've been given to this point.
Well,
But-
I think if I
like
saw
you're
a
saying.
campaign that was similar, that was
Or
like
as-
what you described, but the AI was actually competent, then I probably wouldn't view it as lazy. I'd be like, oh, this is like, the map
Like,
design is
I
simple and
actually had
straightforward, but
a
the
lot
AI
of
is
thoughts
actually
from this
challenging.
This is also a form, because I don't think you could convey like everything without the cutscenes completely, and without if you have
Well,
an actual story.
Yeah. Well, obviously, like, that's one of the challenges I faced. Like, how am I going to handle cutscenes? I'm probably going to have long cutscenes, but they're going to be between missions. So I have to think, how do I want to tell a story in a build and destroy mission where I'm not having constant cuts away from the gameplay?
Yeah, you're not interrupting the players.
So the thing is, I view computer AI as a storytelling element, because how something behaves and how something interacts with you conveys a personality. So this isn't something you're going to see in 90% of campaigns, because for one, you don't have that kind of fine-tuned control over the AI, and for two, people don't pursue that. You know, a lot of people pursue stuff like, or see, or view, or construe stuff like build and destroy as basically a time gate between the content. I wanted the build and destroy experience to be something that drives the storytelling experience. So, you know, if you say, for example, survival against the Zerg, and you have Terrans trying to hold out against the Zerg, you may have some, like in a traditional campaign, you may have some cinematics that are basically just like, oh, the Zerg are attacking, save us, Raynor. Use your Metzen plot device and save us. And Raynor will be like, hell yeah, Raynor's Raiders. We're like this ragtag group of buddies in this outfit. Oh, we got a fleet of battlecruisers too. Don't worry about that.
Oh no! Yeah, we.
You play a mission for 30 minutes defending a command center and like 2 bunkers with 80 battlecruisers, and then the end cinematic is you getting overrun and something completely detached, and it's like this bridge between the context of Raynor coming in and defending with his chin, and then him actually like winning and saving the day, and then it is like it invalidates your entire experience between you and the game. Because what you did in the mission doesn't matter, because it's a cinematic that takes the helm and says, this is what happened. So another easier way of conveying this is all those ARPGs where when you kill a boss, it's the cinematic that actually kills the boss. So you get him down to 0 health, and then a cinematic cuts, and then, or maybe a QTE, and then that's how the boss actually dies.
I think it happened in Diablo a lot, basically, with every boss.
Yeah.
Like...
So, like, that's, again, like, it invalidates everything you did as a player. Because you're not the one who's actually delivering the final blow. You're not the one who's actually role-playing out the experience. So, by eliminating in-game distractions and focusing exactly on the in-game experience, I focus basically like a needle point on that competition. And the whole idea of trying to have an interactive AI is having an opponent that not simply thinks and challenges you on a gameplay level, but also interacts with you from a storytelling perspective. So I'm trying to like integrate the AI into a personality. So I'm not like mapping out how they do things just because this is the right thing to do in the map, but because this is how the personality and the thought process behind that player is actually functioning. So you would encounter some very bizarre things. Like in the very first mission against Zerg, they primarily build infestors and vipers. And they just trolled the shit out of you for like half the map until it progresses. And you prove that you're resistant to this and you're doing well, and then the Zerg actually start taking things seriously, and then their like build orders and stuff completely change. So it was like, obviously it's something that would be very difficult to do, and I can't like say this is going to be something that's going to be widely popular, but it's not like I built my campaign to be popular. You know, I wasn't even on the fence if I wanted to release it publicly or not. There was a lot of people who were asking me about this and were interested in it, but I had never intended to like post it on Mapster, post it on Blizzard's forum, post it on Team Liquid. I would release it to maybe like a handful of people privately, because like that's the experience I wanted. You know, I wanted to play an RTS that was actually testing my abilities, and I didn't have to walk into the window-licking world of Blizzard Ladder to do so.
And I'm assuming you can it's probably harder to do, but you can also do that, not just like storytelling through gameplay, but you can also do like the storytelling through like the environment that you're in. Like,
yeah, that's why I spent 2 weeks designing these custom doodads for Inconsummate, because I wanted to have some element of visual storytelling. And I'm stuttering worse than my fucking frame rate right now, but let me tell you, visual storytelling is not something you really see in Brood War because the doodad palette is so limited and the textures are so like. I mean, it's 1998. It aged well graphically because pixels always age well graphically.
No,
but...
you don't see visual storytelling in Blizzard because in StarCraft 1 because Blizzard is retarded and doesn't play Dota, so it doesn't really do anything. Even,
well, yeah, in the base game they don't. They place like Protoss doodads in Terran-only planets that Protoss have never been to.
Yeah, you have really ideas. Ideal cases where you could like storytell something using the maps. For example, like Zergten and Protostan in Vanilla StarCraft. You could like show how the how Korshakal was it has changed after the Overmind landed, but instead of doing that, They just changed them up completely.
Oh yeah, well it wasn't Korsakov, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and even if they didn't change them up, honestly, the first map for the last Zerg mission like wasn't. I don't think it was good enough to be like representative of a Protoss installation. They didn't have any temples. They like just have random trees everywhere, and the Protoss will look more like Taliban in that mission because they like hide in the mountains constantly.
It looked like the Taliban.
Well, think about StarCraft 2 and Heat of the Swarm. When Kerrigan attacks Korhal, they completely bypass all of the actual fighting, and it's just you in this tiny little base in the middle of buttfuck nowhere.
One thing that really fucking annoys me is that there's no feeling of scale at all in any of the Blizzard campaigns.
Oh,
Even if you are like against the biggest Protoss or the biggest Terran force, the amazing Terran Dominion, they like send fucking 4 Goliaths at you with 10 Marines. It really puzzles me that there are no big attacks, even if they were after an hour. I can understand that, but there's barely any like really significant attacks in the games.
That's because it was
You can never see like 100 Mutalics or 20 Ultralics, which would be something like that. That's like really scary to look at from the player's perspective.
Yeah, it would scare the casuals because Blizzard has the brutal difficulty. And the concept is, this is a hard difficulty. You're a good player if you beat this difficulty. The difficulty is designed for the dumbest player to succeed in. Like, you can just breeze through that or just roll your face no matter how bad you are. And that's the entire concept, is Blizzard wants everybody to feel like they've succeeded. So if they start throwing big attacks at you, some people are not going to succeed. And that's bad in Blizzard's eyes.
Did you know that you can finish the last Heart of the Swarm mission using only the Swarmlings Zerglings?
Yeah, just like you can go through all Wings of Liberty with nothing but Marines and medics. Like you don't even need to use any other units. In fact, you get punished for using other units.
It's actually pretty depressing because I am completely confident I could make a mission in World War that would not be like completely unreasonable to beat using varying units, but it would be completely impossible to beat if you only used Marines by using something.
You even get punished for doing things in Wings of Liberty because Kerrigan has a hidden immortal shield the game doesn't tell you about. So if you use, like I usually just build mech because that is my playstyle, but you can't do that against Kerrigan because she reduces every attack down to a point.
Well, she also will just one-shot any bio or any mech unit in the game on like a 20-second cooldown, if that. Probably faster than that.
Because so then I just like built Marines, unupgraded Marines, never used them in the campaign to that point, and then just destroy her. And the mission is just like easy, and I'm like, okay, right. So this is what the developer intended, and now I win.
Well, I guess at this point we can talk about the fact that difficulty in Brood War. So you're talking about very different like paradigm shift, Mesk, when you're talking about like your idea of just the melee game. You started with 4 workers in a hub, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit, maybe whatever. But typically it's really just all about the RTS gameplay. What you're trying to do.
I'm a purist in a way, so if I'm gonna fire a Brood War, I want to play Brood War, right?
I think what he's saying is like you want to make the player experience the story through what they're going through instead of like forcing it on them to.
Like you can have cinematics. I'm not gonna say like cinematics. You should never have cinematics. Like, there's a lot of people who tell me you shouldn't really have cinematics in a game at all because they're just like a waste of time. But I think cinematics are good, but cuts away from gameplay are not good.
Yeah, you would. I mean, it seems like the cinematic would be the reward for succeeding in the game. Like
the cinematic is like the breakpoint between your experience.
The experience is going to be bad as a player. Like you don't want that. You don't want something that takes you out of the experience. You want to be completely immersed as much as possible. And those rips out of gameplay are obviously going to take you out of it.
Like I hate to use this as an example because it's such a shitty game in general, but I would use Skyrim as an example because okay, conversations like pull you into a menu, but there's like a lot of stuff where it's basically just like you can walk around while stuff is happening and do your own thing.
Yeah, sure.
But then you you tilt yourself on a horse and reload the game, get the velocity from the horse and fly across the map like a torpedo. So
yeah, at the same time it is the whole what you're doing at the same time as anything else is going on in the game is kind of poorly executed. So
It's like incredibly well executed because you maintain your velocity through game loads. And when you dismount from a horse on an angle, you have insane velocity. So you just fly across map like a torpedo. Like, you just go through the air.
so
Like that's how you speedrun that game.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Or you walk into a wall with a plate in your hand and you phase through like a wall and start a loading zone in another dimension, like a place you're not even supposed to be at for like 12 hours.
It's incredible.
But it's the same idea.
But you don't get railroaded in this stuff either. Like
Yeah.
the cinematics and stuff.
Yeah,
relied
the
on-
developers sort of intended to
And,
have you fuck around enough in the game to figure out what you want to focus on. I
and
guess.
I feel like at the same time though, in like in that kind of a scenario, like the times that they do railroad you with shit, like the cutscenes and like the big dialogue of like these huge fucking
Yeah.
chats you have to have with them, I think they do go on, like they kind of do drone on
Yeah.
sometimes.
That's why you
So-
bump into them, the skip dialogue and animations and stuff.
Yeah.
The tried and true. I ran into you, so you skip this dialogue.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, there's obviously like when you're like some of the dialogue in my cutscenes is pretty long, so it's like I definitely want to have this between stuff. So if
Yeah,
you don't want to go
want
through that, if you just want to
interrupting.
play, you can. You're not going
Sure.
to miss anything in terms of the actual missions.
And if it is something that would interrupt, you want it to be like something the player can get around, or
Like it would be something that doesn't, at the very least, doesn't take you out of your current command
yes,
interface.
absolutely.
So they're like NPCs may talk, and you can take use of the ducking options within StarCraft 2, so they don't get interrupted by
yeah, by
units and stuff
gameplay.
going on.
Yeah.
Or give it like something that takes away your ability to get out of that
The other
situation.
thing I really hate too is like tooltips and shit that just tell you what to do and what does what.
Oh my!
Like, I would prefer like everything related be conveyed through in-game dialogue. Like if characters are going to talk about something,
Or
you may as well
experience,
use that
yeah.
to expose in-game elements.
Or you
Like
do it
if
through the gameplay, even
Yeah,
though
like-
that's a little harder. Like people that, especially Western game developers, don't really do that, or they've never done it to begin with. Like it's something that can be done where you you teach the player through the gameplay with the kind of the difficulty curve they're going to go through, learning how to play the game. Like that's how you teach them instead of just straight out telling them what to do. You
But-
know,
people are like the thing is Blizzard's audience, their target audience is people who basically have never used a computer before. So they have to hold their hand through everything because common sense
Yeah.
is not taught in American schools anymore.
it's
So-
also like especially with those types of games, like they're trying to get them on consoles and stuff a lot of the time too. Just like, all right, we have to have this stuff here just in case, or if it does come to a console, like with Diablo, where they have all
Diablo is a console port, so it's like
Yeah,
very,
there you go.
very
That-
beginning
yeah, it's the
was
perfect-
designed with like
Even the
Even
UI was
Xbox design.
designed for a console. Like it's absurd how far they went with that one. Like even the menu options were all made.
it's even more ridiculous because in the console version of Diablo 3 you actually have a dodge ability. I think you have like a roll or something. That's what I've been told.
That I've
Like
never
it actually
experienced
breaks
that.
it actually breaks quite
That-
a bit away.
I was just about to say that probably busts it. That completely
I-
ruins the whole point of the game, I would assume.
I have played console Diablo for a little bit at my friend's place, and you can just turn around from the TV, hold the controller, press buttons, and you won't die. I'm actually pretty confident it's impossible to die in that game on console.
Imagine that makes harder difficulties fucking a charm to play.
I also think you like auto dodge some stuff, like your character automatically just rolls away from certain attacks.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
No, I'm not
Auto
The
dodge.
game's actually playing itself, boys.
Yeah, you have a % auto dodge. Like it's fucking League or something.
Great.
That's absurd.
Well,
Cool, hey man.
a real hey man. Maybe that should have been the title of this episode.
Yeah. We'll save that one for later.
Yeah,
Good luck titling this one.
I already did. It's called Challenge to Birth.
Alright. I guess you got it all figured out.
I sure fucking do. Unlike Blizzard and all Riot and all these other developers.
Modern game designers.
Yeah, but-
Thank database developers.
Remember how we talked about how you talked about tooltips a while ago?
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that in Match Recall, like the big
It's
Saga
it's the
2
port
remake of
of Brood
campaign.
War to
Yeah.
StarCraft 2.
Do you guys know how tooltips of all units look in that campaign?
It just tells you what. No, what are you talking about? Oh, where it has like the really long lore explanation of
Yeah,
what the...
it has all. The...
It has
Yeah,
like 3
I'm going to
paragraphs of, oh, this is what zealots used to be before they became real
Yeah,
zealots. and-
I'm sending the
The
animation.
Templar used to be a yeah.
Yeah, just check the Discord. I think
Like
that's where you
2
send them.
paragraphs. Yeah. There's 2 paragraphs of like
Wall
random
lore.
lore facts about Goliath.
I gave you guys a preview of some of the lore in my campaign in one of those screenshots, I think, about the Peter,
Oh yeah, Tony Peter.
the crusty interns. That's what the infestors summon. They summon a very large number of them. They have to basically just burn all their mana and just spawn like 80 infested turrets inside your base. And then something that the AI would do would cause your FPS to just basically drop to like a quarter of what it was originally. I thought it would have been tactical AI, but it wasn't for this. It was just something stupid. I don't know.
Tactical in the wrong sense.
Yeah, it tactically enters a mall. There's scopes and laser sights and shit, and just guns down all your frames.
Well, it
Yeah.
is an American game, isn't it?
There's definitely a lot of rolling.
Well, I think I've played enough CS:GO while we're doing this, so we can probably start wrapping up now. Is there any final words we'd like to say on the topic of gameplay, challenge, how it's integral to the experience, how you guys want to present that challenge to people, etc., etc.?
Minecraft is a hard game.
Well,
I got
it's hard to play, that's for sure.
Like, I find it really difficult to read Sonic Slash Fishing while I'm playing it. Especially when, like, Tails is involved. Like, it's really hard to play it with no hands.
Of course. Amazing. Well, how about you, Dick Suck? Got any suck for
I
us?
got nothing. He pretty much summed it up with the Minecraft comments.
Yeah. And how about you,
That's
Nekron? You feeling frisky?
No.
No? None of y'all have
Sa-
anything to say?
Everybody sounds like they've been fucking neutered after that.
I brought you back to your Minecraft days, huh?
Yeah.
Not stole your heart.
Back to 2011.
Yeah, when my father was still here. And on that note, I'll see you guys in the next stream. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks to these dick suckers for coming on.
Bye.
Minecraft
Bye.
skeptics!
Amazing.
Shout out to Goku.